Welcome to the Ghost Stories YouTube channel. Here, we will bring you the scariest experiences through ghost stories, mysteries, and inexplicable mysteries of the mysterious world. Whether you are someone who enjoys learning about ghost stories or simply looking for a new entertainment experience, our channel will be the ideal destination. Join us in the horror space and get ready for the most tense and scary moments. Don't forget to press the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. Thank you for joining the Ghost Stories YouTube channel, and now, get ready for some spooky moments with us.
Love and death. Stories should not be heard at midnight. Highway 27, the pass from Ban Mi Thuat to Dalat, is a deserted road, with very few vehicles passing by, especially cars. Yet early this morning, a stranger stopped by a Chinese coffee shop and said to her, "Today you have a special guest." Ha-ni looked at the stranger, then shrugged and said, "If ghosts come, yes." The guest was a woman, around 40 years old, smiled gently and continued, "But it's nice to have it." "But are you?" Ha-ni a bit surprised at the customer's knowledge, but thinking that maybe because she owns this small shop, someone might know the name and repeat it, so she nodded. "I'm Ha-ni, I wonder where you know me." The guest laughed again. "Knowing without being wrong is good. So do you mind if I sit down and talk?" Ha-ni was excited. "The shop here is empty. Sometimes needing a customer to sit and talk is more important than selling a cup of coffee. Please." The guest was quite natural. "Call me Daqui." "Is Ms. Ha-ni unfamiliar with this name?" Ha-ni smiled comfortably. Daqui is the typical flower of this region. Flowers grow on both sides of the road, only thing. She stopped, not daring to continue, when suddenly the guest continued. "Daqui said he became an old ghost, right?" Ha-ni waved her hand. "I didn't mean that. I just, what's wrong with the old devil? Being called an old devil at my age is right. It's only because people like you are so shy that people call you that. That's scary." Ha-ni suddenly sighed. "If you stay here forever, even if you are a beauty queen, you will eventually become a wild sunflower." Hearing her sad sigh, the guest also felt sad. "It's not right for a young person like you to be so pessimistic. In reality, it is like that. Being optimistic will not improve anything." Ha-ni went to make a delicious cup of coffee and brought it to the guests. "Women who drink a lot of coffee are not good for their skin, but if I don't drink this in this country, then what should I drink? I can't drink alcohol, so I try to drink this bitter drink." The guest laughed. "Then the dying wild sunflowers drink with the smiling wild sunflowers." From. They laughed and talked happily together. When the sun was shining, Mrs. Daqui stood up to worship. "Now I have to go. It takes more than 6 hours to get back to Dalat, so we can't go later. If I have a chance to come back, I will visit and hope that I will see a Ha-ni with a new name, Miss Hoa Hong for example." Before walking out the door, she turned back and said, "She's about to meet her friends. Mark my words, that's who will." She walked quickly without letting Ha-ni ask any more questions. Only about half an hour later, a truck stopped in front of the shop. 2 people from the truck helped one. The boy, covered in blood, walked down. They ordered a few cups of coffee and asked the shop owner for water to dip a towel to clean the man's wound. Ha-ni was afraid of blood, so she didn't dare look, but took a clean towel. "Let them clean and also instruct. After cleaning, you can just throw it away." The injured boy seemed very brave, so even though he had many injuries all over his body, he did not groan at all, just sat there and endured the pain. Just occasionally wincing and then bowing my head in resignation. Before he finished drinking the glass of water, the driver stood up and said to the younger boy, You sit with him, I'll go over there and drop off some groceries and I'll be right back. He got out to the car and started the engine very fast. As for the injured boy, Ha-ni sneaked a look and suddenly asked, "Why don't you take him to the hospital for treatment? The injury doesn't seem to be light." The driver replied, "This guy refuses. And we are almost back to Ban Mi Thuat." Sitting for about 10 more minutes, he stood up and walked out, saying, "I'm going out for a bit." And then he left. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, then more than an hour and still no return. Even the truck disappeared. At this point, Ha-ni suddenly understood. They left him here. The injured guy still didn't make a sound, but watch him. He was weak, kept leaning forward and at one point suddenly fell to the floor. Ha-ni panicked. "Hey you!" She had no choice but to bend down to help him up and suddenly discovered that a small piece of paper had fallen from his pocket. She didn't intend to read it, but suddenly saw her name on the top of the piece of paper, so she was curious. "Miss Ha-ni, remember I said this is your guest. If you don't want to be a old devil like me, then accept him and take good care of him. See you again sometime. Wild sunflowers." Ha-ni was stunned for a moment, until she saw the guy keep hiccuping and arching his body like he was having a fit. She had no choice but to use all her strength to pick him up and drag him to her room. Because in the shop, her bed is the only place where she can lie down. Putting the guy down on the bed, just as he was about to turn around, his hand suddenly grabbed Ha-ni's hand, causing her to panic. "Hey, why are you?" But when she looked back and saw that his eyes were almost blank, Ha-ni couldn't help but remove her hand, but just gently sat down and waited for a while. When she saw his hand loosen, Ha-ni withdrew her hand, but did not rush to stand up. Only now did she have a chance to look closely at him. He was quite young, had a delicate face, and didn't look like he belonged to a motorbike or forestry worker like most young men in this country. Is he from another country, she wondered. From then until the afternoon, he lay still as if in a coma, but Ha-ni secretly touched his forehead and saw that his temperature was still normal, so he felt reassured. When it got dark, this girl who lived alone started to worry again. How could he stay here, when she was alone at night moreover? She intended to inform the neighbors, but hesitated. Finally Ha-ni chose to keep quiet. She hoped he would wake up, and if the car didn't return tomorrow morning, she would find a way to send him back to Ban Mi Thuat. This way, at least this kind-hearted girl's heart will be relieved. By midnight that night, while Ha-ni moved outside the stall to sleep temporarily, the guy still lay still on her bed. At about 1 a.m., when she woke up and went to the kitchen, Ha-ni was startled to see the bed was empty. The guy has disappeared. The back door was still locked inside, as was the front door, so where could he go? The guy disappeared in the middle of the night and then appeared early the next morning. Surprised Ha-ni. At night, after searching everywhere and not finding the guest seriously injured, Ha-ni went back to bed, with the idea of investigating again the next morning. Yet when she woke up, Ha-ni's hand touched someone right next to her on the bed. Who? As soon as Ha-ni's question was asked, that person's hand wrapped around her chest and held it there. Only then did she come to her senses. Instead of jumping up and screaming at Een, her intuition told Ha-ni that it was better for her to keep quiet. Because the person hugging her was the injured guy from earlier. And instead of asking, Ha-ni lay still, trying to keep him from startling. After a long while, seeing that he didn't move, thinking he was fast asleep, Ha-ni slowly removed his hand and gently got out of bed. The sky had completely brightened, so now she could see his face more clearly. He slept like a child, his face was half child and half adult. The wounds on his face have dried and the forehead and right cheek have returned to the smooth, good-looking look of an urban boy. Ha-ni boldly called out softly. "Hey guy! Older brother!" Suddenly he sat up and spoke. "Sorry for making you scared." Ha-ni then panicked and stood up from the bed. Where did you disappear and then reappear like a ghost? How dare you, dare to lie on my bed? I have already apologized, if necessary, I will apologize again. It's because of you that I'm in bed. Ha-ni said seriously. At first, I saw that he was seriously injured, so I put him in bed, because there was only one bed in the house. And when I didn't see him, I went back to my bed to sleep. Why did you also climb up and lie down together? What does that mean? You should remember that I am an unmarried girl, so you do that." The guy smiled with withered lips. "Damn girl. I apologize 10,000 times and accept being punished. Whatever the fine is, it's up to you. I just want..." Ha-ni raised her hand to touch her chest, where his hand had been placed earlier. Seemingly understanding, he spoke softly. "I accidentally..." "Surely you wouldn't blame someone in a state close to death, right?" Ha-ni listened to the way he talked and clearly determined that he was from the city, with a smooth mouth but still somewhat honest. And this made her not ask any more, but just looked closely at him to probe further. "Why did you climb into bed with me? Aren't you afraid?" Ha-ni now shouted. "Who lies with you? Someone else's bed, you can climb into it. But you already gave it to me, why did you come in and lie down in the middle of the night, making me think, you really don't remember where you left in the middle of the night? And I searched everywhere but couldn't find it. I'm still lying here. Do not have. Or are you, a ghost?" Unexpectedly, the guy nodded again. "It could also be a ghost. Because if it wasn't a ghost, why would I be in Saigon? I'm about to get married, so why are you staying here?" The way he spoke made Ha-ni curious and asked further. "What do you say? Aren't you the one sharing the car with the people on the cargo truck?" The guy was bewildered. "Which truck?" "The cargo truck from Dalat drove here. In the car there was a driver and me. They brought him here in a state full of injuries and then ran away, leaving me alone to bear the debt." The guy muttered. "How can that be? Am I going with her?" Ha-ni thought he was acting, so he asked seriously. "You said you're getting married, but are you still with another girl?" "So it's her. We were taking each other shopping for wedding clothes. I don't understand why this happened." Looking at his blank expression, Ha-ni spoke softly. "When they put you in the car, did you know anything? Which car? Then the truck brought you here?" The guy shook his head. "I don't know anything. I don't understand why, I don't remember anything at all." "So where is Ngoc Lan?" "Ngoc Lan is your fiancée, right? It's her. Are you looking for that truck and asking maybe when he was taking her on the road, he was hit by that car and they put him in the car to take her away, but the other girl must have died, so they dumped her body somewhere?" Hearing what Ha-ni said was true, he began to panic and said, "Is that true?" Ha-ni had to laugh. "Why do you ask me that?" The guy seemed to be trying to remember, but it seemed like his mind wasn't working as he wanted, so sometimes he remembered, sometimes he didn't, and when he wanted to speak, he froze. Ha-ni had to reassure. "Okay, you rest and you'll remember." As soon as she stepped inside, he suddenly remembered and exclaimed, "That's right, she's in the deep hole." Ha-ni pointed outside, where there was a pool behind the house, and asked, "Is it the same?" The guy looked scared. "Right. She, afraid he wouldn't be able to control himself, Ha-ni had to explain. "Just like this place, not here." "Wait for him to calm down a bit before Hani asked. What is your name, Wind? People call our couple the most beautiful forest flower, orchid. So you are completely awake now. Try to remember, is it true that she died which girl then your wife or lover? Miss Lan or something? The guy jumped up, once again looked around bewilderedly and muttered. That's right, she's out there. Then suddenly, he jumped out of bed and took his head as he ran out. Not having time to stop, I just called out. Don't go there, there's a deep abyss. But there was no time left, in just a blink of an eye, Fong's shadow disappeared. I regretted saying nonsense that made him agitated. I don't know if this time will be the same as before. Will he come back? Although she has lived in this area for a long time, Ha-ni has never gone down to the abyss, so she cannot imagine what it is like below and what will happen if Fong goes down there. She walked to a tree on the edge of the cliff, looked down and suddenly shivered. It was profound and she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. Then suddenly she called out loudly, Mr. Fong. Only the echo of her own voice echoed, but absolutely no one responded. Stunned for a long time, Ha-ni slowly walked back into the house. She was partly worried about the stranger's safety, but she was also surprised that there was something strange and difficult to explain in her heart. When entering the house, Ha-ni suddenly smelled something unusual inside. She blurted out softly, "Who is in the house?" The reason she wondered like that was because her sensitive nose had just detected a very strange scent of someone. Without asking, Hani lightly walked straight into the bedroom and was stunned when she saw a person lying still, her whole body covered in a blanket, only the upper part peeking out. As soon as she looked and saw her long hair covering the pillow, Ha-ni exclaimed, "Who is that?" "She is." The person lying there was indeed a woman. Hearing Ni's loud question, she turned around, turned her face away and moaned softly. Ha-ni panicked when she discovered that her pretty face was covered in blood. "Oh my god! What's wrong?" Ni forgot her vigilance, quickly walked to the stranger's side and pulled out her blanket, just as she cried out loudly, "Bullshit!" Ni's cry was muffled, because at that moment she staggered and fell down. Land. In front of her, half of the other person's body was just a bare skeleton. "Oh my god, help, help!" Ha-ni could no longer control herself. She wanted to run away, but her arms and legs could no longer move at all, as if she had been hit with acupuncture points. While she was unconscious, the other half of the girl's body slowly moved and gently got out of the bed, not paying attention to Ni lying on the ground. An unseasonal rain suddenly poured down, blowing a bone-chilling wind through the window into the house, and in just a moment, the whole house seemed to be engulfed in darkness. Tuan parked his car right in front of the shop and called out loudly inside, "Ha-ni, I'm home." Inside the shop, someone came out. It was Ha-ni, but when she saw Tuan, she remained indifferent, just looking at a stranger entering the shop. Tuan was surprised, but continued to speak. "What's wrong with you? You're only a few meters away and you can't see me." Ha-ni still stared blankly, so much so that a customer sitting in the restaurant who knew Tuan spoke up. "Even though my lover came home and didn't recognize me, what's wrong with this Hani girl today?" Then he turned around and said to pick up Tuan. "From this morning until the time she came in to drink coffee, she's been absent-minded. Like a lost soul." Tuan looked worriedly at his lover. "Are you sick?" "Ha-ni, look at my face, it's pale." Ha-ni Van didn't say anything, but when Tuan stepped closer, she suddenly reached out and pinched his thigh, causing pain. Tuan almost cried out but was able to control himself. He guessed there must be some reason, so he quickly walked into the house. Ni followed. At this point she quickly slammed the door shut and, surprisingly, raised her hand and pushed it hard. Tuan didn't have time to take precautions, so he fell backwards onto the bed. Before he could speak, Hani's hand covered his mouth tightly. Had to stay silent. In a vague state, Tuan remembered that his lover jumped on top of him, and he tried his best to exclaim, You made me think, so it turns out, it's... Then Tuan almost stopped, or rather didn't want to struggle anymore. He accepted to let his lover do whatever he wanted. Half an hour later, the person who reappeared in the living room drinking coffee was Tuan, not Ha-Ni. The familiar customer just now was very thoughtful and spoke up. If you are away from home for a long time, your wife will punish you, right? But it seems like she's not very healthy, so please take care of yourself tonight, if not. He finished, paid for the coffee and walked out. Just a moment later, someone suddenly ran over to announce the news. The person who just left the shop somehow suddenly bowed his head. He's bleeding from his mouth and lying in a heap out there. A few more people rushed over. Tuan also followed, but a moment later he returned, and saw Ha-Ni standing in the shop. He said as reported. He must have been hit by the wind. Ha-Ni remained calm. Everything has its price. Tuan seemed to want to ask again, but he seemed shy, so after that he just quietly helped his lover clean up in the shop, without saying anything. Until an old car parked outside, an old man stepped out of the car, and as soon as he saw Hani, he exclaimed, "It's you. The old woman visited the shop the other day." She looked at Tuan and without even bothering to say anything, immediately said, "This guy is not the person you expected, right?" The question made Tuan look up, but Ha-Ni was not worried at all and answered quickly. "In this deep mountain and valley, having a man is precious, no matter who you choose to save," she said as she walked closer and put her arm around Tuan's shoulder, introducing, "This is Tuan, my lover. He has been working far away for a long time and has just returned." The woman named De Kui suddenly turned serious. "Don't you two act in front of me. Ha-Ni and a guy named Fong." Where her unexpected question made even Ha-Ni confused, and the guy named Tuan trembled and stepped back as if he was about to run away. Ms. De Kui shouted loudly, "Stand still!" But the guy was able to jump over the low fence on the side of the house and disappear outside. As for Hani, who was confused, her hand was grabbed by Ms. De Kui. She spoke sharply. "What do you guys plan to do? Where is he?" Ha-Ni trembled. He. Then suddenly she pointed out the abyss and said quickly, "Down there." On the outside, it seemed slow, but when she took action, Ms. De Kui was very fast. She locked the girl's hand tightly and hissed, "If you don't bring him up, don't live with me." That arm-locking action was probably too strong, so Ha-Ni cried out in pain. "Ouch! Let me say." She was let go by her grandmother, and just as she was about to walk away, she was called back. "I have acupuncture points on your body now, don't even think about escaping. If you're smart, quickly bring that guy named Fong back here." Ha-Ni is gone. Ms. De Kui then turned around and explained to the only customer left in the restaurant. "This lonely place has always been peaceful, but now it is no longer like that. You see, that girl just now is not an ordinary person, she..." That guest was a middle-aged man. Until now, he had hardly paid attention to the argument between the two people. Now that he had heard the question, he slowly turned back and said, "It was you who brought that instability." The woman was startled. You said that?" The man still did not look at Ms. De Kui and continued, "So it was you who caused their deaths, made them like that, so who else can you blame? As soon as he finished speaking, he quickly walked out. Mrs. Dupuy was visibly panicked. She quickly ran after her and called out, "Hey, sir!" But the man was like a shadow, disappearing as soon as he reached the road. Ms. Dupuy was stunned for a moment. When she walked back in, she saw a person lying still on the floor. That person is Fong. Not at all surprised, Ms. Dupuy raised her hand to touch his forehead, then smacked her lips. Still lucky. Fong was still alive, so after a few seconds, he became relieved and opened his eyes, bewildered. Where am I? You don't have to worry, this is where you were saved. Do you remember shop owner Ha and I awakened from sleep? Fong was bewildered. Where is she? Pointing inside the house. Where you lay last night? Fong didn't ask any more questions, immediately stood up and quickly walked into the house. Just then Ha and I walked out. She seemed to have just woken up from a long sleep, stunned when she saw Fong. Ms. Dupuy had to speak up. If I hadn't returned in time, you two would have died. Let me give you a summary. The two of you were wrongly harmed by the ghost of a female ghost. It caused Fong to go down to the abyss and possessed Hani's soul, causing her to almost harm another young man. Innocent. Tuan is a photographer who often passes by this route and once fell in love with the shop owner. It captured that guy's soul, intending to turn him into a couple to continue causing more tragedies with it. Luckily, only now did the two realize it. This Hani hook is completely different from the previous Hani. She shyly looked at Fong. I did. Fong replied. I don't know. I just woke up too. I also. Hani just looked out the house and was surprised. Where is she? Knowing that she was asking Mrs. Dupuy, Fong looked out and said. She was just here. But when they went back out, she was nowhere to be found. Hani was surprised. I just heard your voice. At that time, the man who left suddenly appeared again. He placed a branch of wild sunflower on the ground and said, Here she is. Does the shop owner remember her name? Hani nodded and replied. Yes, I remember, Mrs. Dupuy. You are. The man did not answer, but said as he walked back out. She's not a bad person, but if we don't find her again, the trouble will continue for a long time. He also disappeared as quickly as he arrived. Hani was confused. Why are there all these nonsense stories? Fong shook his head. I do not understand. But I suddenly remembered my story. I remember Lan, when she had an accident. Fong's head hurt when he mentioned that story. He held his head and groaned. I can't stand it. I'm going to die. Hani panicked. What's wrong with you? She panicked but didn't know what to do. While frantic, she somehow grabbed a wild sunflower still lying on the ground and gave it to Fong. It was an unconscious action, but strangely, it had an immediate effect. Fong was completely awake and bewildered. My pain is gone. Or is? He suddenly heard someone's voice coming from inside the flower. Go to Area village and find the owner of this flower. Fong looked at Hani and asked. Who just said that? Who said anything? I don't listen. The voice rang out again very softly, loud enough for only Fong to hear. Go now and remember not to let the wild sunflower out of your hand. Remember me. This time only Fong heard. He had to repeat the content of the sentence to Hani and asked. Who is that? Hani was speechless. I do not know, too. Fong remembered what the man said just now, and he panicked. Do I have to find this woman named Dupuy? She? Accidentally while talking, Fong let the wild sunflower fall from his hand and immediately had a seizure. The pain throbbed intensely again. Seeing him stagger, Ha-ni quickly grabbed his shoulder and cried out. "How are you?" Fong was afraid that Ha-ni would step on the flower. He wanted to bend down to pick up In, but as soon as he bent down, he fell face down on the floor. Fortunately, when he fell, he lay on top of a wild sunflower, thanks to which Fong regained consciousness. At this moment, Ha-ni suddenly remembered. She said, "You cannot leave this flower." Fong asked, "Where is Area village?" "I don't know either, but maybe if you ask someone will tell you." Quickly closing the shop door, Ha-ni urged, "I'll go right away." Calling a cart, she asked, "Do you know Area village?" The driver immediately replied, "That village is about 10 kilometers from here. Find someone there, I know the village well." "That's because I'm also from there." "So do you know a lady named De Kui?" The driver was startled. "Mrs. Lang Lang, but why are you looking for her?" It was Ha-ni's turn to be surprised. "Who is Lang Lang?" "That is the first name of the lady you call De Kui. She is from the same village as me. In the village, people only used to call her Mrs. Lang." "But..." He suddenly looked at Hani with unusual eyes and was about to say something but couldn't do it in time, because at that time she helped Fong in a collapsed state into the car. She sat behind him and urged, "Take us away now." The guy had to start the car. "On the way?" he asked. "Why are you looking for her then?" Without waiting for her to answer, he turned back to look at Fong and asked, "Does this guy have a headache?" And I was startled. "Why do you know that?" Before he could answer, he had to avoid a car approaching from the opposite direction, so he stopped talking. Once he was able to avoid it, he switched to another topic. "Accidents happen all the time on this road, like what happened just now." The words accidentally evoked Fong's pain. He immediately said, "My wife also had the same car." He hadn't finished his sentence when he suddenly stopped, as if something was blocking his throat. Sitting next to her, Hani discovered this, so she quickly asked, "What's wrong with you?" Fong couldn't answer but just gestured with his hand. Hani was even more panicked. "You run quickly. Don't talk anymore, my friend is in danger." The driver was therefore unable to continue what he wanted to say. Nearly 20 minutes later, arriving at Area village, he stopped the car in front of a stilt house and said, "Mrs. Lang's house." Telling him to wait there, Ha-ni helped Fong climb the ladder. When entering the house, she immediately met a young girl weaving brocade. Ha-ni quickly asked, "Is Mrs. De Kui at home?" The girl looked at the customer as if she didn't understand. Ha-ni suddenly remembered. She asked again, "I want to ask Mrs. Lang." Then the girl replied, "Do not have. When will you return from your absence? Don't come back." Seeing her curt response, Ha-ni was a bit annoyed, but suddenly remembered that she was a minority girl, so she softened her voice and asked again, "I have something urgent to do and want to see Mrs. Lang. Please help me." The girl shook her head. "She's dead and nowhere to be found." Ha-ni was startled. "What did you say, Ms. De Kui?" "Ms. Lang is dead." She pointed to the street and said concisely, "Go out there and look down the deep hole, my mother is there." Fong was in a state of shock, but when he heard the sentence, he immediately asked, "Did she also have a car accident?" Just then the cart driver also stepped up and said, "I was about to tell you, but I didn't have time. Mrs. Lang passed away more than a year ago. A truck hit her, threw her into a deep abyss and then ran away. That's why from then on, she often showed up to stop reckless driving cars to warn them. She is a ghost that helps people, not harms them." A few days ago, I saw a truck driving like crazy through this area, suddenly stopped, and then both the driver and the driver jumped down and knelt in the middle of the road, bowing as if they were begging but didn't know they were begging. Who? It wasn't until they left that I saw a bunch of fresh wild flowers lying on the side of the road, I guess. I suddenly said. Mrs. DeQuee. He nodded. That's right, she. I worriedly said. It turns out that every time she appeared, she was a ghost. Then she turned to Fong. You heard the mysterious voice coming from the wild sunflower, is that her? Fong nodded. That's right. Therefore, when I saw this guy holding a wild sunflower flower in his hand, I was suspicious. Did you meet Mrs. Lang? Not comfortable saying it all, Fong just replied. She helped me. And I said. Someone directed us here. The man. Unexpectedly, the driver exclaimed. The Chinese teacher came from Dalat, right? I shook her head. I don't know, I only met him at the shop once. He gave me the address to get here and then left, not knowing his origin or name. Showing his expertise, he added. Many times that teacher came back here, apparently at first to get rid of Mrs. Lang's unjust spirit, but later I heard that he always supported her, every time there was a clash between Mrs. Lang and someone. Fong was surprised. Why is there a clash? Are there many people who want to eliminate her? I don't really know. But it seems like this is a matter between unjust souls. I drove my cart all over this area so many times I witnessed that Chinese teacher sitting on the side of the road burning incense to make offerings, and every time there were wild sunflowers next to the incense sticks. In magic, as far as I know, when people want to help someone, they either place a picture or symbol of that person's soul next to the incense stick. If he didn't make offerings to Mrs. Lang, why would he put wild sunflowers there? I muttered. It's strange. At that time, Fong suddenly fell sprawled on the floor. While I was panicking, the girl who owned the house from before came out. She held another wild sunflower flower in her hand. The flower had dried, placed it on Fong's chest, and said, This is easier to keep with you. When you're done, go home. Before anyone could ask anything, she once again disappeared inside. I called out. Miss. The cart driver said. Minorities don't know how to talk much. She said that's it, just take him home. Look, he's awake as usual. Fong too stood up and spoke as if nothing had happened. I'm back. Thank you, Miss Ha-Ni. Puppet turned to the driver and said. You send me to the market, I'll get off there, and you take this girl back to the shop. Ha-Ni objected. Impossible. I can't go on my own yet, I have to go back to the restaurant to rest, until I feel better again. Besides, he still doesn't know what happened to him. Fong is still determined. So on go. The cart driver did as he was told. When he went out, he enthusiastically took Fong to deliver to a colleague and said, Wherever this guy needs to go, just take him, then remember to take him back to Ms. H.A.'s shop. Ha-Ni didn't feel secure, and she didn't understand why, because she and the guy never had any ties to each other. By the time the cart carrying her back to the shop, Ha-Ni was still confused and worried. The driver thought Ha-Ni was worried about her lover, so he interrupted and said. He didn't go anywhere far, just now I overheard him telling the cart to go to Elephant Head Slope. There was an accident that killed 2 people a few days ago. Probably looking for news about relatives. His harsh words made Ha-Ni even more worried. Did an accident happen there? That place has a sharp bend and is out of sight, so cars often have accidents. Even like me, even though I'm familiar with the pass, Whoever asked me to take me over there made me even more scared. Ha, and I was as nervous as her dearest person was in danger. 3 days later, Fong still hasn't returned. At first, Ha and I was just a little worried, but by the 3rd day she couldn't stand it anymore. She told herself that it was clear that the stranger had officially ruled in her heart. It's not like Tuan, the previous wanderer photographer. That time Ha and I only had feelings for him. When she didn't see him for a while, she missed him, looked forward to it, and wasn't restless and worried like this time with Fong. Early in the morning of the 4th day, Ha and I proactively went to find a cart driver named Tu Luong and suggested, "Please take me to Elephant Head Pass and return here in time to sell lunch." Tu Luong immediately guessed her purpose, so he immediately accepted. "I will drive you, but only to this side of the slope, I won't run to the other side." Ha and I had never actually passed through this Highway 27, so she nodded. "Just take me there, let me." "You went to find the guy from before, right?" Ha and I doesn't want to hide. "He's been gone for 3 days and hasn't come back. But I also forgot to ask you, people. Where is Fong that took him away that day?" Tu Luong was startled. "I've been busy with work these past few days, so I forgot to ask him how he took the other guy that day. So get in the car, I'll take you to find him and ask him, then we'll go look for him." Running around the place where the carts often park to wait for customers, but not finding Ba Long, Tu Luong said in surprise. "This guy is very diligent, rarely misses driving, but today I didn't see him." He asked an acquaintance and was told, "I heard that Ba Long took guests to Booloc and hasn't returned for several days, nor has his wife and children returned. Knitting fever at home." Ha and I panicked. "Is there something wrong?" Tu Luong also panicked. He didn't wait for Hani to tell him and ran straight to Ba Long's house. As soon as this man's wife saw Luong, she burst into tears. "Do you know where my house goes?" Ha and I suddenly asked. "Has he not come home these past few days?" Seeing Ha and I, Ba Long's wife, surprised, Tu Luong had to introduce. "This is Ms. Ha and I, the owner of the cafe on Slope 30. A few days ago she asked Ba Long to take her friend to Dau Voi Pass, but today her friend has not returned." Ba Long's wife was even more panicked. "So it's dangerous. Why didn't you tell me these days so I could look for you?" she urged her older child. "Take me there now." The 2 cars sped towards Elephant Head Pass. Ha and I was as frantic as Ba Long's wife. As soon as they arrived, while everyone was still standing from above looking down into the abyss, Ha and I walked down a path, causing Tu Luong to shout, "You can't get down like that." He stopped a passerby to ask, but that person pointed at the abyss and immediately said, "Just a few days ago, a motorbike landed here, and this morning someone said they discovered several corpses in the farming village below." Ba Long's wife screamed, "Oh my God, Grandpa!" Ha and I was also frantic. "We have to go down there." She forgot all about the danger flowing down the path. Before Tu Luong could stop him, Ba Long's wife also ran after him. A few passers-by saw it and shouted loudly, "You can't get down that way, climb up and go around there." Fortunately, they were just in time, but otherwise, in just a few dozen more steps, the 2 of them would have been in danger, because it was a deep abyss with no way down, and more than 100 meters below were tall trees and jagged rocks. More than half an hour later, following the indicated path, they reached the bottom. It is a home village of the Hmong people. As soon as she entered the first house in a hamlet of about a dozen rooftops, Ha and I cried out when she saw a man sitting cross-legged in the middle of the house. "Hey, you are That was the guest who drank coffee and showed Fong the way to find Mrs. De Qui's house. He was not surprised to see Han Yi's appearance, but calmly said, "I knew sooner or later you would come here. But it comes at the right time and at the right time." He waited for her to come and take him home. Once again, Han Yi was surprised because right before her eyes, Fong was lying still like a corpse. "Hey, is he okay?" She sat down right next to him and touched Fong's chest and nose, like a wife's gesture. Then rang in. "Still breathing?" The Chinese teacher spoke up. "If I was one step late, he would have lost his life." Conveniently, he pointed to Fong's pocket. "Luckily, thanks to this item." Han Yi took out a dried wildflower and said, "It was the girl who was given to him by the wild sunflower." The Chinese teacher nodded. "At least she did that." Then he stood up and urged, "You should take him home immediately. There are a few people I asked, they will help you bring him up." After waiting all this time without seeing her husband, Ba Long's wife suddenly asked, "Where is my husband?" Without looking at her, the Chinese teacher said, "The cart driver went home early this morning. Why are you still there? Go home quickly and take care of his health. He was also lucky so he escaped. I must say it is thanks to Mr. Fong's blessing." Hearing that, she did not wait for Hani, she immediately went up with her son. Tu Luong also went up. At this time, the Chinese teacher privately called Han Yi outside the house, pointing towards a small stilt house located alone in a corner. "I couldn't say it because the other woman was present, but now you're in no hurry to take Mr. Fong home. He still needs to stay here until he has resolved the matter with the people in the other house." Han Yi was surprised. Who is in there? The person she needs to meet sooner or later. If I said it was your rival, would you believe it? Han Yi is even more confused. "I have never had a lover until now. The person who can be said to have had a little emotional connection with me in the past is a photographer who lives on the streets, but that is just a friendship, nothing more, nothing less. However, recently he and I no longer have any contact with each other. Besides, he is single, so how can anyone be my rival?" the Chinese teacher said solemnly. "Yet there it is. She's a love rival, and if she doesn't resolve the problem between her and her, she'll continue to suffer for a long time." After he finished speaking, he quietly sat down right next to Fong, leaving Han Yi confused. "Can you show me what I should do now?" he replied curtly. "Go to that house and meet the person you need to meet first." "But..." The Chinese teacher seemed to intentionally not listen, so he closed his eyes and sat motionless. No matter what Han Yi asked him, he remained silent. There is no other way. Han Yi had to walk alone to the other house. Her mind was confused, she didn't know what would happen, so she walked away feeling worried and scared. However, when she stepped inside that small house, Han Yi was surprised, because there was no one inside the house. An empty house, with only a few items, and I was even more surprised at first glance, because they were the belongings of a woman, but a kinwoman. "Who is here?" Look at the new, very beautiful turquoise clothes hanging on the wall, next to it is the cloth hat of an urban person. Han Yi guessed that this place was the residence of a girl who was not a Hmong girl. In one corner of the room there was a new leather chest, with a photo frame on the lid. Curious, she walked closer and saw a photo of a very beautiful girl in the frame. Han Yi's eyes widened when she read the rather fancy writing in the corner of the photo, Fong Lan. Orchid. The person Fong told about. Unable to control herself, Han Yi had just exclaimed when she suddenly heard someone speak from behind her. "Do you know my name?" Too startled, Han Yi turned around and was stunned, because the person standing in front of her was indeed the girl in the bust photo. You haven't answered my question. She repeated the question, making Ha-ni confused. I heard, Fong told you, right? He dares to tell other people about me, it's clear he has nothing more to say. She was angry and walked vigorously, but how could Ni not hear the floor move? While she was still surprised, she heard her shout loudly. What do you want to come here? The feeling of fear suddenly disappeared. Ha-ni replied briefly. To meet you. I will kill anyone who takes away the person I love. I waited and today you brought your body here, which means you have found the last moment of your life. Ha-ni was no longer shy, so she dared to look straight at the person talking to her. However, what surprised her was that although she heard voices, looking around Hani still saw no one, except for slight vibrations at the window, as if someone was standing there and breathing into the thin fabric curtain. She is. A cold voice replied immediately. People no longer have portraits. Are you not afraid of ghosts? Suddenly, Ha-ni became bolder. Before, yes, but from now on, no. Do you know why? While in the position of being the one to take the initiative in attacking, suddenly the girl who called herself Lan seemed to pause and her voice softened. Do you think you have that Chinese teacher protecting you? Actually, Ha-ni didn't think that at all, but when she heard her ask, she immediately replied. Maybe. Moreover, Fong is still here. I don't know if he's human or ghost, but I know for sure he's a loyal, kind man. Lan's voice was harsh. He is not faithful. Because if he was loyal, he wouldn't have left and gotten to know her while knowing that I was in trouble. Why would a good person leave his lover lying in this abyss and go alone? Where did you say he went alone? Then I went to find you, met you, and made you come all the way here to look for me, while I had become a ghost, already a cold and hungry soul in this place. Ha-ni is gentle and doesn't like arguing with anyone, but she still has to laugh. She only knows how to love and be selfish, but other than that, she doesn't understand the value of love at all. She said she was an unjust soul and didn't even know that her lover was injured and almost died, and that someone else took his body away and left the market. Do you know who saved him? It was Lan's turn to laugh out loud. You dare say that you are the one who saved me? That's right. This saying is from a Chinese teacher. He appeared when the two of them were arguing without realizing it. Before Hani could turn around, he arrived and was even more surprised when Lan's voice cried out in surprise. What do you say? This girl, it was she who saved Fong, otherwise, he would have died in another abyss. The drug smugglers and those who harmed his children took Fong to this girl's place and left him there. If she hadn't been kind enough to save him, Fong wouldn't have survived. Just to save Fong, she almost got into trouble, because those guys borrowed the hands of the witch doctor A Lung in Yokdon Forest, intending to turn her into a ghost. Luckily, her ex-lover took his place. As soon as he said this, Ha-ni screamed. Could it be that Tuan? The Chinese teacher gently shook his head. I feel sorry for him, but it's also fate. The others knew that Tuan was in love with her, so they lured him back to share the same fate as her, but because her fate was not yet met, only Tuan died that day. Tuan died without risking his life, dragging along the ghost girl who was his henchman. Old medicine man A Lung died together. That's why from that day on, she existed like today. It's just. He was about to say something more, but suddenly stopped and fell silent, walking over and sitting cross-legged in the middle of the floor. Lan's voice trembled again, echoing in. Dad, don't you love your daughter? Father? It was Ha-ni's turn to be confused. Ms. Lan is your child, the Chinese teacher sighed and answered his son first. If I didn't love my son, I wouldn't have come all the way. If I didn't love you, I would have almost lost my life because of the witch Dr. A Lung's ghost. Do you know that saving Fong, saving Ms. HNL, bringing them here is not an easy task. But this HNI will. The Chinese teacher stopped me. This girl has no intention of fighting for the person she loves. But this is fate. Dad works as an exorcist, he knows this very well, including your lack of luck. The day you and Fong went to Ban Mi Thuat on Hainyang's bus, my father couldn't stop you, almost implicating Fong's life. Lan shouted. As for my life, you leave it alone, right? Dad didn't let me, but I had to give up. Because your fate is over, if you don't die that day, you will die a few hours later. Lan's voice was sobbing, she tried to scream. Then why don't Fong die with me? He loves you. The Chinese teacher sighed again, this time sounding more thoughtful. It would be better that way, to avoid something even more tragic than death. Again. Do you know what Fong is for you? I'm your lover, nothing else. If you were just one step late, everything would be ruined. Sun and Fong are brothers from the same father and mother. No. Lan's cry of surprise made Hani also shocked. He said. Lan's voice was full of excitement. Dad, what did you say? Dad lied to you, didn't he? Do you remember the night before when you ran away to Ban Mi Thuat with Fong? Father scolded you and wanted to beat you if you didn't end your love for Fong. Lan's voice sobbed. I didn't expect Dad to be cruel enough to separate us. That's why Fong and I decided to leave Ban Mi Thuat. We plan to live there forever. The Chinese teacher spoke sadly. Dad was stunned when he heard that you and Fong loved each other. Before that, I thought the two of us were just friends. Besides, that day, I learned that Fong was the blood that I shed with an ethnic woman in Ea village. Suddenly Hani cried out. Mrs. Lang, Mrs. De Kui. The Chinese teacher nodded. Right. It's her. In the past, when I worked in the forest in that area, I fell in love with a girl. The Thuong girl's name is Yiling, nicknamed De Kui Flower. I have one with her. Son, but as soon as she gave birth, she died in a landslide accident. I thought the child was buried along with his mother. Who would have thought that not so long ago, after a long time, her spirit appeared to me and told me that when the accident happened, the child did not die, it was taken by a bus driver and raised, and its name was Wind. She forced me to stop the love between the two of us, and I did, almost not making it in time. Then he turned to Lan's voice and asked urgently. Is there anything between you and Fong yet? Lan replied very quickly. Not yet. We only love each other with pure love. Mr. Fong is a person. Kind. There were two sighs of relief at the same time. One is from the Chinese teacher and from Hani. Both smiled contentedly. The old man said excitedly. If you are unlucky, only God can change it. Well, even if my father loves me and misses me, I have to accept it. Now all that's left is Fong and this girl. He turned to Hani. It wasn't a coincidence that the bad guys brought Fong's body to her shop that day. Where? That was due to the guidance of Mrs. De Kui's ghost. Hani exclaimed. So she showed up right away. Until now, she is still by Fong's side and her side to prevent those guys from harming the two of them. Poor her. He turned towards Lan again. I don't want to send you back to me because you need to stay here for a while longer. There have been too many accidents in this place, and there are too many unjust souls. I am the one who will help neutralize the 4 evil spirits and unjust souls in this place, to reduce deaths. Then, when the father sees the medicine, he will take his son's body back home to Dalat. There was Lan's sobbing sound. Hein Yang told her junior. You stop at that shop across the street. It's too expensive. Ignoring the car, Ngo smiled widely. That's why the car kept crawling uphill all this time, feeling pitiful. Everyone in the car is full of gourds, so the car is too heavy to move. Banging on the back of the car, Hein Yang quickly got out, turning back to instruct the driver. Ton Thursday rested for a while and then went to Plyco to eat in time. She went straight into the shop to go use the restroom, but the shop owner pointed out. On the other side, Myun Yang walked a few dozen meters further, saw a small house in a corner and walked in. But she had to stop, because it was not a toilet, but a temple of ghosts. Before she could back away, it was as if someone suddenly pushed her hard, causing her to fall backwards, accidentally turning her knee right in front of the steaming incense bowl. While still confused, I was about to stand up when I suddenly heard a loud voice. Listen. Why haven't you bowed yet? She immediately fell down, her head hit the ground and she bowed 3 times in a row. When she looked up, she suddenly trembled and cried out. You are. In front of her eyes was a girl sitting cross-legged on the altar. Although her hair fell close to her face, Ms. Nyang still recognized her and repeated. You, why are you here? A burst of laughter rang out. She didn't expect that the person she pushed down the elephant's head abyss is now here. Mew. Do you think that by changing the area of operation and not allowing vehicles to pass through Highway 27 anymore, you will not encounter injustice again? Shut up. If you keep pinching me anymore, I'll cut off my tongue. She answered me. Why did she push me into the abyss that day, while she only beat my lover and then dragged her into the car to take her away? Yes, I didn't mean. I just. A few slaps immediately made her faint, almost falling and leaning her head forward. Her voice was dismayed. To be honest, I still hope for my life, otherwise. Hein Yang was originally cruel, her tongue had thorns and corners, but now she is as soft as noodles. Yes, just because I was angry at you for stealing Fong, who was the person my father raised since childhood. Fong is the person I hope will follow my family's footsteps and do business. Lie. Fong is a good person, he is grateful to you for raising him, but since he became an adult, he knew that your profession of smuggling prohibited national goods was illegal, so he intended to leave the house several times. He swore he would never get involved in that dangerous business again. Yet some people had the heart to harm him. As for me, I'm just an innocent person. Why do you guys kill me? I just accidentally did it. Moreover, because you're afraid I'll denounce you guys. Even if you're afraid, you won't be able to escape. I tell you, starting from today, please consider quitting your job, otherwise you won't regret it. As soon as those words finished, there was a cluster of blue smoke rising from where the girl was sitting, then. That's gone. Hein Yang was scared and lost. Miss Lan. She remembered, this girl was Fong's lover. She pushed her down into the abyss that day, because she thought she was the reason why Fong was so confused that he wanted to leave home. So why is she here? She suddenly realized and screamed. Ghost. Ignore people. She immediately ran out of the temple. When she entered the house, she had not yet regained her composure, only whispering to the innkeeper, Ghost. Ghosts out there. The shop owner shouted. What kind of ghost is here? Mu Hein Yang pointed out the temple. Outside the temple there are ghosts. Although annoyed, the shop owner also came out to take a look. She returned and shouted. This woman is ungrateful, that is a shrine to the native land of this land for many generations. What devil is in there? Ghosts. I see ghosts. Then she ran all the way to the car and urged her juniors. Hurry up. For some reason, she told the driver to turn toward Highway 27, instead of driving in the direction of Kantam and Pleiku. Just a week later, at the foot of Elephant Head Pass, the most dangerous bend, before the cars climb the pass and go downhill, passers-by see a quite spacious shop growing up. The shop owner directly selling is Hai Nyang. At first, passers-by were surprised and a bit surprised, so they often stopped by the restaurant. However, just a few days later, rumors spread strongly. Mu Hai Nyang opens the shop for free for the first month, then only charges 50% of the price of other shops. That rumor is not wrong. When customers visit the restaurant for the first month, anything they eat or drink is free. Mu Hai Nyang declared. In the past I did many wrong things, now I repent, I want everyone to sympathize and forgive me. Thanks to that, my restaurant became more and more crowded. In particular, the cars that stopped to rest there all had the same comment. Opening a shop right here is really convenient for us drivers. Because you come here to rest before going up the pass and downhill, thanks to being alert, there will be no accidents. That statement is very true. Since the shop opened, accidents have decreased. And that desolate area also became less cold. More specifically, the restaurant is more crowded at night. This has never happened before, because in the past traders rarely pass this road at night, because the road is not safe and there are often robberies. Yet now most vehicles like to pass by here at night, to be able to stop by the restaurant to rest, and sometimes to enjoy some wild animal specialties cooked by the restaurant's private chef. Over time, the good news spread far and wide, everyone liked to visit that restaurant called Hai Nyang. Until the end of the year, when they happened to pass by there, Hani and Fong, who were then married, stopped at the restaurant to rest. On the afternoon of the end of the year, it was late at night so the restaurant was empty. There was only a young couple so they ordered drinks which were served very quickly. Taking a sip of coffee, Hani complimented. This coffee is not inferior to Tung coffee in Dalat. Fong also confirmed. It's delicious. Half similar to the coffee flavor of Ban Mi Thuat. The two of them wanted to leave after drinking coffee, but suddenly the waiter brought us a few plates of steaming food and said, our shop owner invited 2 aunts and uncles. Please feel free to use it, the restaurant offers entertainment, no charge. Fong quickly said. It's not about money, it's because we have to hurry. Suddenly a clear voice spoke from inside. Can you refuse an old friend's invitation? Fong turned around and was startled to see a very beautiful girl walking out. Ngoc Lan. Hani heard her husband call Lan's name and was also shocked. This is. The girl proactively spoke up. Lan that she met in the abyss that day, but now she can see her face. Hello beautiful new bride. Fong had not yet recovered from his shock when another person walked out from inside the house. This time Hani cried out again. Mrs. De Kui. Fong had heard his father tell him everything, so at this moment he felt like he was in a dream. She is. Mom. Ms. De Kui suppressed her emotions, stood far away, and exclaimed. With. Just then, suddenly a bus stopped outside and quite a few people got in. That caused both Lan and Mrs. De Kui to quickly retreat inside without being able to finish their words. Fong tried to follow, but his feet felt like someone was pulling him back, and he couldn't take any steps. Hani was more sensitive, she said softly. Can't meet them. Don't you remember they're dead? They are, unjust souls. At that time, many customers came in, and the waiters came out to take care of the customers. Fong asked, but they all replied, "There is no one here but us." They sat there dumbfounded for a long time. Even when several customers came in and left, the silhouettes of those two people still did not appear again. When Hein Yang came out and said, "You should only pay attention to what you see. Then you will understand later." Fong wanted to talk more with the person who had taken care of him, but Mrs. Nyang seemed to want to avoid it. She kept busy taking care of the guests without even sitting down with Fong. Later, many people rumored that Hein Yang's shop was a ghost shop. Because there are nights when they pass by and see the restaurant is empty, with no one serving, but whenever they stop in to order food, it is immediately served quickly. Even so, I don't understand why people still stop by the restaurant without fear. When asked, someone said, "No matter what, as long as the service is good, it's fine." Only Ha-Ni and Fong were convinced that what they witnessed was true. They told each other. Maybe Hein Yang's repentance moved the unjust souls at Elephant Head Pass and helped her succeed in opening the shop. Chin Fong and Ha-Ni returned to that restaurant many times, but they never saw Ms. De Kui and Ngoc Lan again. This move is the third time, in just 2 years. But it's not just a simple cleaning. Each time it's cleaned, it's a huge fortune. Clean out an entire villa. Some people wonder why this young homeowner with the foreign-sounding name Robert Lee changes homes so often. That question was only answered when his longtime driver, Tu Tai, revealed that the reason his owner kept moving was just because of insomnia. Why does a very rich person like him have difficulty sleeping, while it is a disease of poor people? People who have to busy with thousands of jobs, have to think and calculate to make a living, the same driver Tai once said. "I don't understand why my boss stays awake until midnight every night, and every time he does, he often forces everyone in the house to turn on the lights in all the rooms in the house." When asked why, he didn't say anything but just roared fiercely every time someone didn't listen to him or do what he wanted. Robert Lee is a young man, not a doting, difficult old man, yet he has such a strange habit. There must be a reason. However, besides the driver's rare revelations, no one else knows anything else. And it's hard to know, because besides the driver who said a few things and then kept his mouth shut, he wouldn't say more even if he gave me gold, and the other maids in the house were almost always fired sooner or later. Job. The boss has been single ever since everyone knew him as someone who likes to move houses like changing clothes. This villa, located on a land of more than half an acre, is famous for its beauty and luxury. Many people before Mr. Robert Lee wanted to buy but didn't. Okay, because the seller said the price was too high, but when he came in to look, he only asked the price later. Then he signed the check immediately, without thinking twice. He bought a house like he bought a few thousand dong. When he moved in, the first thing he did was to send driver Tai to pick up a geography teacher from Hong Kong, quite famous among the Chinese in Cholan. That geography teacher was asked by his employer one thing. "I am satisfied with most of the construction details of this house. I don't have to change anything. I just ask you how to calm it down, especially to keep the house from being cold at night." The request was quite strange, but the geography teacher immediately accepted. He also asserted, "Your insomnia will also end from now on." Robert Lee seemed very satisfied. He rewarded the geography teacher with a large amount of money in advance, as if he had just received a great favor from this teacher. It was the third night Lee moved into his expensive house. He was really satisfied, because clearly, as promised by the geography teacher, for the past 2 nights Lee had slept peacefully, and slept for a long time, without dreams, without startling in the middle of the night. He was so happy, he called driver Tai over and said, From now on, you don't have to stay awake and wait for the light to turn on like before. I can sleep in the dark now." Tonight Lee went to bed quite early, before 10 o'clock. The night lights in his room were also turned off, showing that he was at peace and sleeping well. Until midnight that night, "To Tai, why aren't you sleeping yet?" But when asked about that, Mr. Lee jumped up, because he felt that the person walking through the outside window was not Tai. A person with long hair fluttering in the wind. "Who is that?" After Mr. Lee's question, there was suddenly a crashing sound, like something had just fallen. Panicked, Mr. Lee asked loudly, "What's up?" Without thinking, he threw open the door and ran to the place where the noise came from. Sure enough, in front of him was a person lying on the floor, a woman with long hair. There was no light, but because it was moonlit, Lee recognized that the person lying there was a quite young woman. He hesitated a bit, then with a natural reflex he put his hand around the girl's body to help her up, muttering, "Why are you going anywhere at this hour?" Then naturally, Lee carried the victim into his room. And instead of calling the driver, he put the girl on the bed himself. When he turned on the light, he was even more surprised to realize that it was a young girl, as beautiful as a picture. "Who is she?" Lee wondered, just as the girl turned over, opened her eyes and exclaimed softly, "This is..." Lee assured, "I am the owner of this house. I just heard you fell outside, so I took the liberty of bringing you here." The girl jumped up, but was so dizzy that she almost fell. Lee had to reach out to support her and speak. "Just lie down and get well." The girl covered her chest with both hands as if trying to hide something. Only then did Lee notice that a large piece of her chest was torn, but he had not noticed because he had measured it in a hurry. With a quick movement, Lee quickly took his coat that was placed at the head of the bed and covered her body with a reassuring word. "Don't be shy, this house besides me also has a driver sleeping nearby. You just rest well, and then if you need to go home, I'll call the driver to take you home. My name is Lee." The girl seemed calmer, she said very softly, "My name is Mai En Hung." Okay, you don't need to say anything, just rest first. Let me make you a cup of hot lemon to drink to warm you up. Looks like she's cold." She was still shaking, but after being put on the coat she seemed to feel better. Then she was a bit hesitant to get out of bed, but Lee was able to speak up. "It's okay, just sit there." But the girl took the initiative to sit on one of the two chairs in the room and spoke apologetically. "It really bothers you? I'm lost. How did you get lost in this house, when the outside gate was locked and the fence surrounding the house was quite high?" "Yes. I was chased by someone. Just because I saw a murder." The statement shocked Lee. "Who did you say killed?" "Where to kill?" Pointing out, the girl's voice was still blank. "Out there, in the neighborhood outside." Then she explained clearly. "My house is next to the fence of this house. I was sleeping when I heard someone calling for help outside. I opened the door and walked out, just in time to witness a man swinging a knife and slashing another person. I was so scared that I screamed, so the murderer turned around and chased me. Perhaps he was afraid of having his murder revealed. I was so excited that I quickly climbed up the tree next to the wall and jumped into this house's garden. I endured the pain and crawled here." The explanation was quite reasonable, so Mr. Lee did not ask further. He wanted to ask if the girl was injured anywhere, but seeing that she was still holding her chest with her hands, it was not convenient to ask. Suddenly seeing a stream of blood seeping through her fingers, Lee panicked. "She is injured." The girl didn't respond, just moved her hand away from her shoulder and fell to the floor. Panicked, Lee helped her and once again brought her back to bed. This time the girl fainted completely. The clock on the wall then chimed loudly. Lee intended to stay up to watch the girl sleep after he himself bandaged the wound on her shoulder, but in the end Lee fell asleep. When I woke up, I heard Driver Ty's loud voice outside. "Boss, it's too noon. Today he told me to go early to the rubber garden to visit his friend in Tainin." Only then did Lee suddenly remember. He looked up at the bed and panicked when he didn't see the girl lying there. Where from outside, Ty thought the boss was asking him a question, so he quickly spoke up. "What did you say, miss?" No, I said." He opened the door and asked in bewilderment. "Do you see anyone out here?" Ty was stunned. "No one." Afraid that Ty would discover abnormalities in the room, Lee said. "Well, you go outside and wait, I'll prepare a little first." Returning to look at the bed, he discovered that on the pillow there were a few words scribbled in lipstick. "Thank you for letting me rest and taking care of my wound. I have something to do and have to go home urgently. I'll have a chance to repay the favor. Myan Hung." Lee was stunned for a few seconds, then looked at the back of the garden, where there was a high wall separating it from the neighbors outside. He thought for a moment, then asked Driver Ty. "Do you know the neighborhood behind my garden?" Ty nodded. "Yes, I know. But I haven't been there once since he moved here. Take me over there." Ty was surprised. "Sir." Lee did not let Ty ask more questions and quickly walked to the back garden. "Hey, why did you go this way? I want. Do you want to climb over the wall better?" Although he had no such intention, Lee also wanted to see with his own eyes whether the girl's story was true or not, so he urged Ty to walk to the wall. Having a fruit-picking ladder nearby, Lee himself climbed up and looked to the other side. Sure enough, there was a big jackfruit tree. Its branches stretched all the way to the wall. Lee silently said, "She's right." Then he and Ty drove around the neighborhood. At this point Lee was a bit confused. He didn't know how to ask, because she and he had only known each other for a short moment. Fortunately, just then an old man came out from the house next to the wall. He squinted his eyes and asked the stranger, "Who are you looking for?" Lee quickly replied, "Yes. I want to find Ms. Myan Hung." The old man stared at the luxurious guest, then quietly turned and walked inside, letting out an invitation. "Please come into the house." Lee let Ty sit outside the car, and he followed inside. Seeing that the house was empty and there was no trace of the girl, Lee was about to ask a question when the old man said, "Why do you need to see my nephew?" "Yes, you haven't told me how you know my niece." "Yes, you and Miss Myan Hung just met. I want to ask if the wound on her shoulder has healed yet." The old man was startled. "Is it injured?" Lee was surprised. "So she hasn't come home yet?" The old man suddenly changed his tone. "No. I want to ask, are you the one who saved me?" Lee breathed a sigh of relief. "Yes, almost like that. I want to know if she is okay now." The old man nodded slightly. "It's okay. Sir, well, it's not at home right now. Last night he probably went to his grandmother's house." "Yes, I am a grandfather. His nephew has been here with me since his parents passed away." Lee looked up and saw a rather large portrait of Myan Hung hanging next to an older woman that at first glance Lee was suspicious. It seemed familiar. Before he could ask, the old man said, "Please drink water." He saw Lee keep looking at the photos on the wall and said, "He and his mother were still alive?" "Yes. Is she Mrs. Thursday Ha?" The old man was surprised. "You know my daughter?" "Yes, if it is true that it is Mrs. Thursday Ha, then I know. My grandmother and my parents knew each other before." So whose child are you? Yes, my father is contractor Lee Ka. The old man widened his eyes and looked at Lee for a long time, then exclaimed, "What around earth? I know your father. Once upon a time." He suddenly stopped and then remained silent. Only when he was very observant did he hear him sigh. Pouring a cup of hot tea for Lee to drink, he looked at his watch and said, "Sorry, I have to go to the market. Today is the anniversary of my daughter's death." Lee hurriedly, "I'm sorry, I'm bothering you so much." He excused himself and went out to the car to urge the driver, "I'll just go home." The driver unlocked the car, but after several times of starting it, the car still wouldn't run. Lee grumbled, "I've been told many times to take good care of my car." Tai was confused. "Sir, I just adjusted the car yesterday, it's still good. Check how the fuel is." "Yes, I just poured it yesterday afternoon, the tank is still full." At that time, Lee saw an old man riding a bicycle passing by, carrying a shopping basket on the bicycle. He urged again, "People ride bicycles and are faster than me." Before the car could start, Lee suddenly discovered there was a small cemetery behind the house. He told Tai, "Turns out my house is next to a cemetery, which I didn't notice when I bought it." Tai saw that while he was parking and waiting, he said to the boss in a friendly manner, "This is a private cemetery, with only a few graves. Maybe it belongs to this house. There you are." Suddenly Lee felt curious. He said, "Try starting the engine, let me take a look." He walked quickly to the back of the house as if compelled by something, unable to resist. The first grave he saw made his eyes dizzy. He had to rub it twice and lean closer to the tombstone. Nguyen Thi My Nhung's grave. What Lee couldn't believe his eyes. He bent down to look, and while he was still in shock, he suddenly heard a voice behind him. "This is a twin sister, the same name as her nephew." Turning back to see the old man who had just returned, Lee awkwardly said, "Yes, my car stalled, so are you curious about the name on the tombstone? It's not him but his younger brother, with the same name." Lee heard his heart beat lightly and he breathed a sigh of relief. "But I thought..." Just then, the driver called out, "You can start the engine, sir." Lee quickly greeted the old man and immediately walked out of the car, afraid that the old man would ask more questions. "I don't understand why I'm like this either." When the car was running, he asked Tai, "Have you ever encountered a situation where two sisters have the same name?" Tai immediately replied, "Yes, sir. Like in my hometown, both of our children's names are Lai, but one is the older Lai, and the other is the younger Lai. But one is alive and the other is dead. Have you met?" "Not yet." "But who are you that house?" "The older sister's name is My Nhung and the younger sister also has the same name. The older sister lives, the younger sister dies." Tai looked at the owner. "Do you know any of the two girls?" For the first time, Lee was embarrassed in front of his driver. "Oh no." Tai vaguely guessed something but didn't dare ask. He only asked when the car reached the main road. "Shall we go to Tainan?" Lee looked at his watch and replied, "Okay, let's go home." As soon as he got home, Lee went straight to his room, and as soon as he opened the door he almost screamed, because there was someone lying on his bed. And that person is none other than My Nhung. "Why are you here?" The girl smiled brightly, completely different from last night's haggard look. "Yes, I can't go out." "So you're still in this house from last night until now? But why this morning? I decided not to bother you anymore, so I planned to go back to the wall to climb to the other side, but as soon as I climbed, I fell and lay unconscious in the bushes." Lee panicked. "Have you been fainting ever since, shy girl?" I woke up later, but when I came in here, you had already gone out. So how did you get into my room? You left without locking the door, so I came in. Because I don't know anyone in this house, so the safest way is to go to the room of the person I met last night just to be sure. Once again, Lee was convinced by the young girl's fluent speech. He looked at her with concern. How is your wound? The girl smiled innocently. I fainted for a long time, but when I woke up, the wound almost no longer hurt. Thank you. Lee frowned. Why are you locked in my house and why are you thanking me? That's because, if I return early, I will definitely be satisfied with my grandfather. My grandfather loves me, but leaving home overnight is not okay. But last night you said you were chased by bad guys. Besides, I didn't hear her grandfather say anything annoying. Hearing Lee's words, the girl stared at him. Why do you know that? Do you? Lee had to admit. I'm sorry for having to come to your house to ask. Because her sudden disappearance made me worried. The girl raised her voice questioningly. Who did you meet in the house then? Your grandfather and also? Lee stopped speaking, looked at the girl for a few seconds before continuing. See the grave bearing her name too. That sentence made her wake up immediately. But Lee kept saying. The grave is named after my Hung, but her grandfather said it was her twin sister with the same name. She sat down on the bed, her face relaxed. Is that right, Miss My Hung? The first time she heard him call her name, she was satisfied. Aren't you surprised that I'm not the one in the grave? The question was a bit surprising and it took Lee a few seconds to answer. I'm looking for you to find someone who's still alive, not to look at the grave. She suddenly stood up and was about to walk out when Lee called back. You said you were afraid of being beaten when you came home, so why are you coming back now? Have you seen my grandfather go to the market? That's fine, I just need to go home and cook, wait for him to bring the food home and he will be happy right away, no scolding and certainly no hitting. Even though your niece left home overnight. My Hung paused slightly, then suddenly said. Or you can take me home to help. Okay, Lee shrugged. Come back and confess that you kidnapped your niece to beat her for her. She didn't pay attention to the content of the question, but still urged Lee. If you helped, please help. Lee called the driver. Please take this girl home, where you and I just went. Ty was bewildered when he didn't see her. Which girl? Sir, she is in my room. Ty was shocked. Do you have anyone in the room? Lee harshly. Just do it if you say it, why bother asking? Suddenly My Hung's voice rang out. Only if you give it to me will I come home, otherwise I will sleep here. Too surprised, Ty stuck out his tongue and shrank his neck as if secretly worshipping his boss. Knowing he misunderstood, Lee shouted again. Don't think nonsense. Quickly take the car to the door. Ty drove to the gate to wait. A moment later Lee came out with the beauty. As soon as he saw it, Ty exclaimed. This is... Lee had to give the talkative driver a painful slap on the shoulder before he would keep quiet. He drove the car out of the gate and had just gone more than 10 meters when he suddenly grabbed his head and cried out in pain. The car, which was in full swing, almost crashed into a light pole when he had time to slam on the brakes. Lee shouted. What are you doing, Ty? But at that time, Ty was slumped over the steering wheel, his face pale. Quinn, Lee shook him and called. Ty, what's wrong? Fortunately, just then Ty opened his eyes, he panicked and pointed forward. Don't you see anything? There is. Lee was surprised. Something people were lying on the road. I almost ran over them. Lee saw absolutely nothing like what Ty said, so he quickly looked outside and grumbled. No one, "What's wrong with this guy?" Tai still looked scared, pointed his finger forward and said with a trembling voice. "There, don't you see?" At that time, My En-hung suddenly spoke up. "Someone had an accident ahead, try getting down and see." Forcing Ian Lee to open the car door and get out. As soon as his feet touched the ground, Lee suddenly cried out. Here they lie. Right next to the car, right where Lee had just stepped off, there was a person lying sprawled out. At this moment, Lee panicked. "So you touched someone?" Lee bent down to help the victim up, but was suddenly stunned when he looked at the face of the middle-aged woman lying with her eyes closed at her feet. Mrs. Thursday Ha. This woman has the same face as in the portrait photo at the old man's house this morning. At this time, Lee quickly looked into the car. He was about to ask My En-hung, but he could no longer see her. A few passers-by saw it and shouted. "Why don't you take people to the hospital instead of waiting there until they die?" Lee suddenly regained his composure. He urged Tai, "Put her in the car and take her to the hospital immediately." Even though it's been over 10 years, this woman's face still resonates strongly in Lee's mind. He feels like a lost soul when he remembers My En-hung's grandfather's words that morning. "Since her parents died, My En-hung has been living with me." He suddenly shivered, but still urged Tai to run quickly to find the hospital. When he arrived at the emergency hospital, he personally opened the door and urged Tai. "You take the trouble to carry her in, quickly." But suddenly Tai shouted loudly. "Mr. Hai, look!" Following Tai's pointing finger, Lee looked out to the back seat. He was horrified to see a human skeleton there, not the woman who had been in the accident earlier. "Oh my God!" Lee just had time to cry out like that and then went silent. Cold sweat soaked the back of his shirt. Having to silently carry the human skeleton in the car back to the old man's house looking for My En-hung was something Lee had to do reluctantly. He encouraged Tai. "Try to help me a little." Tai questions. "But you don't have to take it back there, while we can just dump it in the dump. Any vacant land is fine." Lee said in a serious voice. "Impossible. Just follow me, then you'll know why." When Tai drove to the right house in the morning, Lee was surprised to see the door closed. Thinking the old man hadn't returned from the market, he told Tai to turn off the car and wait. More than half an hour later, Lee started to get impatient, especially the fact that My En-hung still hadn't returned home. He asked Tai again. "During the chaos earlier, did you see the girl getting out of the car?" "Yes, at that time I was shocked, I didn't know anything." After waiting another half hour, Lee decided to get out of the car and go around the back of the house, to the stone tombs. He was startled to see that the grave next to the grave with My En-hung's name was broken into a large piece, as if someone had destroyed it. The tombstone clearly states, "Leghi Thursday Ha's grave." Curious, Lee bent down to look closely at the hand-engraved text below. "Hate the Vuong family." Why is the surname Vuong? Lee was agitated when his Vuong family was mentioned here. He sat down right at the head of the grave, raised his hand to dig up the sand and soil to cover part of the next line to read the whole sentence. "This person's ungrateful heart can only be satisfied if it is torn to pieces. For the rest of your life, you will never be able to raise your head, Duong Quang." At this point, Lee could no longer stay calm. He exclaimed in shock. "What about my father?" Duong Quang is his father. His connection to this woman named Thursday Ha was something Lee knew, although it was still vague. "But the inscription on this grave is definitely for my father," Lee whispered. Why does this happen?" He sat there for a long time. When he stood up and went back to the car, Lee was once again surprised to see Tai slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious. Looking out the back seat, he exclaimed. "Where the skeleton is gone." Lee looked around. The neighborhood was deserted and there was not a single person in sight. The old man's house is still locked. When Lee walked over and looked through the crack in the door, he panicked, because in the middle of the house there was a red coffin lying in the dim shadow. Still confused, Lee suddenly heard someone behind him. "There's no one in that house. Who are you looking for?" Lee turned around and saw a middle-aged woman looking at him as if searching. Lee must speak up. "I'm looking for the landlord. He has a granddaughter named Mai En Hung." The other sister looked at Lee Kong and said, her voice trembling slightly. He was, and you. She could only say a few words and then ran away like a ghost. "Chase!" Lee bewilderedly called out. "Hey sister! Hey, sister!" In the blink of an eye, the woman disappeared. Lee was still wondering when he heard Tai calling and honking the car horn. "Uncle!" When Lee returned to the car, he saw that Tai's face was still blank, so he asked, "What happened to you just now? What about?" Lee asked while looking out the back seat. Tai replied in a trembling voice, "I was sitting waiting for you to come out when I suddenly heard a noise behind me. I turned around and saw a middle-aged woman with long hair past her back glaring at me. Before I could react, my vision suddenly became blurred, my mind dizzy, and I didn't know anything anymore." Lee was even more confused. He pointed to the back of the house and said in a slightly trembling voice, "The tomb back there is also. Suddenly Lee felt like someone was stopping him from speaking. He panicked and urged Tai, "Run!" When he got home, Lee was still in shock. He told Tai, "If you hear any movement, run to my room immediately, don't let it happen. I have to call." Lee closed the door to the room, and he opened a few drawers that stored papers and books that he had not had a chance to organize when he moved here. The object he was looking for was something left by his father that Lee had rarely paid attention to for a long time. Most of them are copies of construction contracts for large projects, sometimes mixed with a few private papers and letters. And finally, the object Lee was looking for was there. It was an old plastic bag, carefully wrapped in letters, pictures of his father and of a person named Thursday Ha. Here it is. Since his father died more than 8 years ago, Lee kept these things hidden in a private cabinet. Even his mother, who died 2 years after his father, did not let her see them. "Then I am Mrs. Thursday Ha and father." Lee curiously flipped through each envelope and photo. At this time, he discovered that on a photo taken of Ms. Thursday Ha alone, there were red ink lines crossed out, almost trying to erase the beautiful face in it. Why would anyone do that? Lee flipped the photo to the back and was startled to recognize his mother's familiar handwriting. "This bitch, you cannot exist in this world according to God's will, don't blame anyone." Reading a few more letters, Lee knew they were love letters from a person named Thursday Ha, including the following passage. "My story is getting closer and closer to a dead end. I ask you to please forgive me. As for me, forget me, and I will get married. It pains me to do this, but it's better than that, because I can't love someone who is already married, spending all these years waiting in despair. Okay, forget about centimeter. Thursday Ha. It turns out my father fell in love with this woman while he was already married to his mother. No wonder Mom is so jealous." Coming to the last letter, placed under a stack of photos, as soon as he read the first line, Lee was stunned. "I hate you from life to life, Duong Quang." The content is similar to the sentence on the tombstone. And also, the next lines. "You can't guarantee love for people, so let them be happy, why are you so cruel in destroying what people have worked hard to build? If you acted cruelly, don't blame yourself for the dire consequences." Lee put down the letters and pictures and remained silent for a long time. "So is my father at fault in something, or is it Miss Thursday Hawes' fault?" During that entire day, Lee almost did not leave the room. He tried to find more details, but couldn't find any. Suddenly he remembered his mother. "At my grandmother's house, where my mother lived in the last days of her life." What just flashed in his mind made Lee call out to the driver, "Prepare to go to Baria now." Tai was surprised. "Only go to Baria, or do you also go to Vung Tau?" "Let's go to Baria, go to my grandparents' house." Tai wanted to stop it, because it was already past 5 p.m., but he knew his master's personality. Once he wanted to do something, only God could stop him. Therefore, Tai still drove the car to the gate and waited. When Lee opened the back car door, he asked in surprise, "What package is this?" Tai was bewildered. "Yes, I don't know what to pack." Lee opened the outer layer of wrapping paper. He was surprised because inside was a tin box, the type to hold biscuit. But inside there was no cake, but filled with papers, letters, of Mom. Looking at the writing and familiar objects, Lee immediately recognized that they were the objects of Mrs. Maihoa, his mother. Lee asked again, "Why is it here?" Lee knows for sure that most of his mother's private belongings were taken by his grandmother when she passed away and kept in the room his mother had reserved in his grandparents' house in Datu district. It had never been brought home, let alone lying in the car like this. Lifting the lid of the box, Lee discovered a piece of paper with strange words. "There's no need to go all the way to Baria, everything you need to see is in this box." "Who wrote these words, do you know?" Tai showing the piece of paper with those words written to Tai. He shook his head. "I don't know." Lee changed his mind. He said, "You put the car back in and wait for me a moment." He went straight to his room and opened the tin box one by one. The first sheet of paper startled Lee, because there were no words written on it, but only a portrait photo of Miss Thursday H.A. with a slash in red pen. One slash is enough to say the person's intention, erase the person in the photo. And yet, right below there was a letter with strange handwriting, very rough and written. Address mother's name directly, "Dear Mrs. Maihoa." Lee's hands trembled a bit when he opened this letter to look at it. "According to your wishes, I let my juniors finish everything. Her rival, her husband, and children were all burned alive, like a house fire accident. No one would have thought it was a murder. So, this time she no longer had to feel guilty about the punishment. She blamed me for being half-hearted like last time. Her rival now no longer has the opportunity to write letters of complaint to her husband. So I ask you to give the remaining salary to the person holding this paper within today. TB, your careful instructions were also thoughtfully carried out by my juniors. Before he died, your rival was informed of an interesting detail that it was Mr. Duong Kwang who took action to avenge Ms. Thursday's death. Ha left to marry someone else, causing her husband pain. The soul of that person under the golden stream will always think that she was murdered by her lover. And if they take revenge, they will definitely only look for your husband to take revenge." Putting down the letter, Lee could only scream a few times before collapsing. With difficulty, Lee found a small house deep on the road leading up the mountain in a village more than 5 kilometers from Long Dien town. The house was closed and silent. After standing outside for a long time, Lee still didn't see anyone come out. The sun was gradually getting lower, making Lee a little worried, because if he couldn't find the person he was looking for, he might have to go back to Baria to sleep, and then come back tomorrow to look for more. Just then, someone asked from behind, "Who are you looking for?" Startled, Turning around to see an old lady, Lee politely said, "Yes, I want to find Mr. Nam Luke." The old woman pointed at the house. "He's in the house. You have to wait everywhere to call out to him, but if you stand outside, when will he come out? Yes, but the outside gate is tightly closed, push hard to get in, there's no lock. But let me tell you in advance, be careful when you go in to meet that old man." Lee was surprised. "What's wrong, Uncle?" I just asked about the house a little, but didn't bother him in any way. The old lady shook her head slightly. "This old man has a very erratic temper. Normally, he would not interact with anyone, nor cause any trouble to anyone, but if anyone made him angry, he would not be able to run away in time. In this country, everyone is bored, no one dares to step into the house. You can count." After speaking, the old lady went straight. Lee hesitated a bit, but in the end he boldly pushed the gate and entered the yard. Someone's words in last night's dream still echoed in his ears, like an urge for Lee to meet the old man. "If you meet Mr. Nam Luke, everything will become clear. He will tell you what you must do to escape this suffering. Otherwise, you will suffer from constant insomnia, be harassed for the rest of your life, and even destroy all the inheritance left by your father." Lee quickly walked to the door of the house and knocked a few times on the door, calling out, "Uncle Nam, Uncle Nam." He had to call a third time before he heard a hoarse voice say, "Who's that?" "Yes, I came to see you urgently. I come from Saigon." "Who is from Saigon?" The old man's voice became vicious and curt. "Who? Yes, my name is Lee. I need to find Mr. Nam Luke." Which reason Lee started to feel shy when he thought he was about to face this aggressive person. He tried to soften his voice. "I was introduced by Ms. My En Hung." Unexpectedly, Lee's fabricated statement had an immediate effect. The old man immediately opened the door and asked, "Where is My En Hung?" He stood facing Lee without paying any attention to him, just looking around. Understanding the meaning, Lee had to say, "Yes, I'm alone. I just..." The old man's spindly arm swung up and very quickly, he punched Lee directly in the face. If he hadn't been alert in advance, Lee would have received that slap. He quickly reached out to grab his arm and spoke, "I have no bad intentions. I just followed My En Hung's advice to meet you and bring you some gifts." Although his old arm was fierce, its strength was no match for his youth, so when Lee restrained him, he had to withdraw his hand and suddenly burst into tears. He sobbed like a person who had never cried before, making Lee worried. "Hey, Uncle. I just..." He had prepared the gift package according to the advice of his dreamer. "I told you, some cigarettes to smoke." As soon as he brought it out, the old man exclaimed like a child receiving a gift, "This is your daughter My En Hung. Its gift is here." He grabbed it without waiting for Lee to give it to him. And his attitude changed as soon as he held the gift package in his hand. "Where is your daughter My En Hung? How big is it? Why doesn't he come here to give you medicine?" The continuous questions made Lee not know how to answer when suddenly he saw an enlarged portrait hanging on the wall of the house, a picture of a little girl about 3 years old, similar to My En Hung. The premonition made Lee respond promptly. "Yes, My En Hung is grown up now, she can light a cigarette for you to smoke." While he was happy, he suddenly looked at Lee and shouted, "Why teach girls to smoke? Haven't heard yet." Having finished speaking, he held the medicine heel tightly in his hand and walked straight inside as if he was afraid someone would snatch his gift package back. Observing the incident, Lee partly guessed the old man's temperament and health condition. He softened his voice and said, "My En Hung sent her regards to him and told him not to eat or drink erratically." My En Hung. Suddenly the old man turned back, pointed at the photo of the little girl, and said with a smile, "The child died when she was just that age, what a pity." Now it was Li's turn to be surprised. He was confused. "Yes, I. Sit down, then tell me where my nephew is now." It turned out that the old man was not normal, remembering one thing and then another. Li grasped psychology quite well because he studied psychology abroad for several years. He continues to use his knowledge. "Yes, let me give you a cigarette to smoke," Mian Hung showed me. Indeed, Li's way of speaking conquered the old man. He appeared friendlier. "Okay, I've been coughing a lot these past few days, so I've stopped smoking. So please pour water for him to drink, like Mian Hung did back then." Li immediately poured a glass of water from the cooled teapot and gave it to him and said, "You drink it better, I'll wait for you to boil water and make another pot of tea for me." Mian Hung said he likes to drink strong tea. This detail was made up by Li. Unexpectedly it was what he intended. "Yes, I miss you so much. I like to drink hot and strong tea, but it must be lotus tea." Fortunately, the gift package Li brought contained both cigarettes and tea. He quickly said, "Mian Hung sent you lotus tea." The old man was touched. "I still love you. It's so bad." Li thought to himself, so this is the girl's grandfather, and the old man next door is his grandfather. He naturally went to the back of the kitchen without any opposition from the old man. He found the kettle hanging on the stove, without any water in it, proving that the old man lived alone and had no one to take care of the food. Waiting for the kettle to boil, Li brought it up to light the pot and asked the old man to take the lotus tea packet from the tobacco wrapper. He added, "Mian Hung said he likes to sit and drink tea while telling stories to his children and grandchildren, so now." He intended to provoke to begin the inquiry into what he needed to know, and him succeeded when the old man said, "In the past, he always asked us to tell stories when we sat smoking and drinking tea." Her small hand couldn't hold a handful of cigarettes, but she always asked her to smoke. "I feel sorry for that bamboo shoot hand." Looking at his grandfather's teary eyes, Li knew that in his heart he was reliving the image of his beloved granddaughter, so he directly hit that weak point with the words, "If Mian Hung asked you to tell me why she left you, would you be willing to tell?" Li waited for words that told the truth of the story he needed to know, or maybe the old man's wrath. Unexpectedly, the old man's voice suddenly became gentler and more emotional. "He left me when I only had him as my only grandchild. That day was about the same time as he was sitting listening to me tell a story when he suddenly ran out, shouting that his house was on fire. He panicked, because at that time his parents were fast asleep in there, and when he came here, because he was afraid of thieves coming in and stealing his stuff, he locked the door from the outside." "Oh my God!" The old man said that, then he hiccuped and barely had enough strength to sit still. He fell forward. Li panicked. "Hey, sir." He helped the old man up and heard him say very softly, "When you meet Mian Hung, tell her not to make things difficult for people, it's not because of him." The statement was ambiguous and difficult to understand, causing Li to ask again, "Who did you say that guy was? Duong Quang? It's not him, it's his wife's daughter." When he said this, he was exhausted, turned his head to the side and fainted. Li carried him to the bench in the middle of the house. "Sir." Feeling that he was still breathing, Li felt a little reassured, but the question in his heart still made him uneasy. Why did the old man talk about his father like that? He's right. I met him and asked him carefully, and I'm planning to come back and see you again to explain. Especially meeting Thursday Ha and her mother to resolve the hatred in their hearts for so long. That voice shocked Li. He turned around and was bewildered when he saw the old man he had met in the house near his house, where the graves were. "Hey, why are you here?" The old man calmly sat down on the chair and replied. "Just like you, I went to find out the truth." "So you've been out here for a few days now, but why is there a coffin lying in the middle of my house below? Don't you realize, that is the coffin of your father, Mr. Duong Quang?" That sentence shook Li. "Oh my god, why is it like that? That's Thursday Ha's idea. For more than 10 years now, it has only been burning with revenge. Even though it is a person of the underworld, it still cannot stop its hatred. Because he still firmly believes that his father is the one who caused the death of his wife, husband, and children. Until recently. He took an envelope from his pocket and gave it to Li. "Read it and you will understand." Li took it and exclaimed in surprise. "This is a letter someone sent to my mother." "So you already know, it was my Enhung who brought it to me." He said that after understanding this, he no longer hated his father, but he also wanted his mother to do the same. "Yesterday I also received this letter in my mother's box. Apparently my Enhung also brought it." The old man nodded. "That's it. My Enhung has feelings for him, so she doesn't want her mother to continue to hate and continue to cause deaths to the Duong family." Li panicked. "The deaths of the Duong family," the old man continued in an annoyed voice. "Your father died because Thursday Ha captured his soul, so did your mother and then you." Li turned pale. Are you telling the truth?" the old man continued to sigh. "How can the unjust family's karma continue like that? That's why the day you came to my house to look for my Enhung, I was scared out of my mind. I don't want my daughter to continue to sink deeper into that hatred, even though she has the right." When he said this, he burst into tears, making Li feel sad, and he felt his eyes sting. "Sir." Li was interrupted by the old man. "Let me finish talking first. That day I lied to him that I had 2 my Enhung children. Actually there is only one, and that is my Enhung lying in the grave. And the my Enhung he met was..." Li stopped him. "I understand, it's her ghost. But there are things you still don't understand. Like where you live. What do you not understand? What is the house you live in? That's the house your father built for Mr. Nam Luke." Li was bewildered. "Is that a thing? But who knows? I bought it because someone told me. Thursday Ha's soul did this to you. It wants to bring you back here, too." He continued in a trembling voice. "It wants to take your soul away." Li was disappointed. "No wonder for nearly 2 years now, strange sounds have been ringing in my head, causing me constant insomnia and fear of the dark. I don't know anything about the house I live in." The old man continued. "At that time, my cousin built a house next to mine. Thursday Ha's son was still alive that day, and he and his father were a couple that seemed like nothing could separate them. I also agree that they love each other. But for some reason, all of a sudden, his father got married and married the person he later called his mother. Thursday Ha was so miserable that her eyes were swollen and she kept trying to hold on, calling for her father to regain his composure and return to her. I knew that, so I firmly said it. She broke off the relationship with your father, because I didn't want my daughter to be known for destroying other people's families, even though she was the one who came first. Come first and come later." Pausing for a moment, he continued in a sad voice. "She took revenge by getting married. Mr. Nam Luke's son at that time lived in the house he lives in now, which is next door to me and Thursday Ha's house. I'm not sure if they really fell in love with each other or it was just an arranged love affair to satisfy Thursday Ha's hatred, but when they lived together, I realized that Mr. Hoa's son, Nam, loved him. The real Thursday Ha. Until they have their first child together, my and Hung, I believe they will be able to live together forever. I'm very happy. But... He stopped, his anger making it impossible for him to continue the story. It took nearly 5 minutes for Lee to hear him speak, his voice hoarse. Yet one afternoon, the house suddenly caught fire. At that time, I had not returned from going to the market, and my En Hung, who was over 3 years old at that time, went to her grandmother's house to play, only having time to return when the fire had engulfed the entire house. The outside door was locked. My En Hung tried to rush in to open the door and was also burned along with her parents. Oh my God! The old man fainted again. At this time, in the small house there were 2 old men lying motionless, making Lee confused. He had to run to get a towel dipped in water to wipe both of them. Moments later they woke up. Mr. Nam Luke continued in a sad voice. For a long time I was so sad that I went crazy, because I only had my son. He died and I no longer wanted to live. That's why he sold the house you were living in and left here to hide. Yesterday I went to ask him a few more things related to my daughter, and intended to return to advise Thursday Ha not to hold grudges anymore. In fact, when he brought your father's coffin home and placed it in the middle of the house, he put your body in it to vent his anger. Last night, he would have been harmed, if it weren't for my En Hung. He had an argument with his mother, not allowing Thursday Ha to pick him up when he was planning to go to Baria. Lee cried out in panic. It turns out she prevented me from going to Baria with my mother's box of things. Right. Actually, this box has been kept at my grandfather's house for a long time, but I don't live here. Your grandmother's house? My En Hung took it and gave it to him to help him understand everything, and at the same time prevent him from going out. Because if you had gone last night, you wouldn't have been alive. Lee shivered, looked first at the 2 old men and then looked around the house. See the picture. Photo of my En Hung in her childhood, he wondered. She was only 3 years old when she died. Why is she now a girl? Mr. Nam Luke calmly replied. People in the invisible world also grow up over time. She has returned here many times, but every time I entered the house I thought it was some girl, but I didn't expect it to be her. If he was still alive, he would have been 17 or 18 this year. He cried again. Then the old man cried too. And it was Lee's turn to not be able to hold back his tears. When Lee returned with the old man, they were both extremely surprised to no longer see her coffin lying in the middle of the house. Lee was still confused when the old man pointed behind the house and said, "It's probably buried there." Lee ran out and was extremely surprised to see a new grave located right to the left of Thursday Ha's grave, in the same row with 3 graves, Thursday Ha, her husband and my En Hung. Europe is fine. Lee spoke softly and silently prayed. Dad, lie here. She has already forgiven Dad. Lee returned home with a less heavy heart. From that day on, Lee opened the fence to the other side. Every day he visits the 4 graves and often incense smoke. From that day on, every night the lights in Lee's room turned off very early. One time, driver Tai was lurking outside and heard a girl laughing from inside. Originally a person who liked to chat, but for some reason, from then on, Tai kept his mouth shut, not telling anyone a word about what he saw in his master's room. But really, there's nothing to talk about. Because in this world, it's not surprising that people and ghosts are related to each other. Mrs. Le Tui shivered from the cold wind suddenly blowing in from outside. She walked over and closed the window tightly and turned on the heater. This is an exception, because although Dalat is cold, she has never had to use the heater for a long time. For her, the cold in this land of flowers is nothing compared to the cold in a foreign country where she has spent more than 10 years studying abroad. Therefore, since returning home and buying this old house on a hill more than a kilometer from the city center, she has opened the doors, even at night. To her, fresh air is more important than the cold air that people often shy away from. The servants in the house did not agree with that, but they did not dare to have an opinion when the mistress wanted. Tonight, she had even more reason to prove that she was not afraid of the cold, because her son called her in the afternoon and told her to close the door and make it warm in the house, so that when he brought his daughter-in-law, when she came back, she didn't have to freeze. Because she was very allergic to the cold air in the lat, Mrs. Le Twee was inherently prejudiced against this daughter-in-law who was not chosen by her, so whatever she did not like, she wanted to do the opposite. Regarding her daughter-in-law Mai Dong, she strongly objected when she was still abroad when she received the news that Huang Loc was getting married. For her, Loc's wife and children must be her choice, which she has already done. She wants Loc to marry Lan Huang, a girl in France with her parents who is her close friend. However, Huang Loc did the wrong thing when he organized the wedding himself without his mother's presence. When she returned home, a fierce argument broke out between mother and daughter, leading to them moving to Dalat to live on their own, not caring about the thriving business that needed her contribution. This afternoon, Loc called to inform her that he and his wife were going to meet her to discuss some important matters. She had intended not to meet her daughter-in-law, but because Loc said it was impossible not to meet her, she was forced to let Loc bring her daughter-in-law up. She intentionally sat and waited. However, for some reason while sitting, Mrs. Le Twee caught me. She closed the window but didn't want the maids to see that she was cold, so she turned on the heater herself and closed the door, then falling on the cushioned chair. Suddenly she felt so sleepy that her normally alert eyes seemed to want to close. "Get out of this room now." Ms. Le Thue's soul was still not asleep, but someone's words seemed to echo from nothingness. She tried to get up but couldn't, so she tried to raise her eyes and asked softly. "Who said what? I told you to get out of this room right now, did you hear me, old?" The voice became more and more harsh and seemed about to pounce on her, causing Ms. Le Twee to raise her hand to block it and once again tried to lean forward to avoid it. She felt like someone's breath was blowing on her face. She screamed. But her cry could not escape her throat, while the voice repeated again. "I say again, will you come out? This room is mine. Why did you come?" I took over and automatically turned on the fireplace. "I don't like it." The electric heater that was emitting hot steam suddenly turned off, and then a strong slap on her cheek caused Ms. Le Twee to fall to the floor. Then, she cried out loud. "Ignore people." Just then, there was a loud banging on the door outside. "Grandma, what's going on?" Ms. Le Twee stood up but still felt groggy. It took half a second for her to regain her composure and understand that she had just experienced a nightmare. "Second child, you pushed the door in, the door wasn't locked." Hai Suong, her effective maid, was worried. I heard her screaming so hard, "What's going on?" Remembering what had just happened, she didn't dare say. "I saw something terrible, but it was a dream. Maybe I'm lying on my shoulder, so." She looked at her watch and smacked her lips. "Why hasn't Mr. Loc come here yet?" Hai Suong replied. "Just now I heard the phone in her room ringing so loudly, I thought she heard it. I fell asleep. I wonder if it belongs to Loc." As soon as she finished, the phone rang again. Dad grabbed the receiver and was surprised when the other end of the line was not Loc's voice, but was talking about Loc. "I was a passerby passing through Bao Loc Pass and met Mr. Huang Loc's car in an accident there. Mr. Loc is okay, but still. Ms. Le Tui put down the receiver, her body stiffened and her face turned pale. Hai Suong panicked. "What's going on, ma'am?" She spoke like a lost soul. "Loc's wife is dead. Oh my god. Hating my dung is one thing, but her death is another." It makes Ms. Le Tui confused and worried a lot. The young bride, whom she had only met a few times before the day they separated, was actually not a hateful or evil person, but she was not the person she chose. "People brought my dung's body out of the abyss after Huang Loc's car lost control and fell there. Although she died due to an accident falling down the pass, their car got caught in a big tree trunk and hung there. Only she fell out, crashed into a tree branch and died, while Huang Loc was stuck in the cabin, so only minor scratches. At midnight that night, my dung's body was transferred from the hospital morgue at Huang Loc's request. He did not want to leave it at the morgue and then move straight to Saigon as his mother wanted, because he argued, my dung has the right to lie down for the last time in her mother-in-law's house, instead of lying in the cold morgue. Even if mom objected, I would still bring her back here, and I even held a funeral here, instead of taking her back to Saigon. Mrs. Le Tui had to let her son do whatever he wanted. From that night until morning, she claimed to be sick and lay down in her room. The next morning, when she woke up, she heard the sound of Catholic prayers being recited outside, instead of chanting according to Buddhist rituals. She called Loc in to protest, because the family is Buddhist. However, Loc flatly protested. My dung is Catholic, so I have to perform the ceremony according to her religious rites. If you don't participate, let me do it. Loc's opposition to her mother was evident and seemed tense, but with many guests coming, it was not convenient to argue with her child, so Mrs. Le Tui once again silently retreated into the room. For most of that day, she did not show her face, even though she heard that my dung's grandparents, that is, my dung's parents, were present. Huang Loc had to say tactfully to his wife's parents, your mother had a heart attack, so when she heard the bad news, she fainted and hasn't been able to get up since yesterday. Maybe my parents shouldn't have come to visit. It'll only make her more tired. My dung's parents were determined to bring their daughter's coffin back to Saigon, so that afternoon they rented a car to move it. Thanks to that, Ms. Le Tui relieved her burden. When the car transporting the coffin was confusing, Tu Suong himself advised her, no matter what, you should go home accordingly. But she was determined. Since Loc said so, I don't need to go. Besides, I can't bear it until the funeral is over. Hai Suong leaned close to her ear and said, while shrouding Aunt Ha's body, I saw 2 lines of tears flowing out of her eyes. Ms. Le Tui glared at her. Bullshit. You are infected with 3 myths. But Hai Suong asserted, it's not just me who sees it. Her mother also saw it, and I saw her using a towel to wipe away Aunt Ha's tears. Uncle Loc cried when he witnessed that scene. Although she dismissed the story as nonsense, when she went to her private room to lie down, Ms. Le Tui was haunted by what Hai Suong called a corpse with tears in her eyes. So late that night, she had to call Hai Suong to sleep with her. She explains, I feel like I'm not feeling very well, so I need you by my side. If I need to shave at night, you can shave for me. Hai Suong knew she was scared, but pretended not to understand. She even said, I sleep with grandma. If in the middle of the night she's afraid of the wind and doesn't go out and needs anything outside, I'll go instead of her. That midnight. Perhaps she was too stressed all day, so as soon as she lay down, Ms. Le Tui fell asleep. Hai Suong turned off the lights and lay down as well. About an hour later, Ms. Le Twee turned to her employee and said in a sleepy voice, "You snore and grind your teeth so much I can't sleep. Or just go out and sleep alone." Hai Suong did not answer. It seemed she was sleeping too soundly. And the snoring gets louder. Mrs. Le Twee had to get up and reach out to turn on the brighter night light bulb. She snapped, "This baby sleeps like the dead. Wake up." And she only had time to say that. Then her heart nearly stopped when she saw that in front of her, the person lying there was not Hai Suong, but my dung. "Oh my God, I. She staggered and fell back onto the bed, accidentally falling right on my dung's body. Rescue. She fainted. When she was revived, the person standing in front of her was Hai Suong. She whispered, Why, like this?" Hai Suong was surprised. "What's wrong with you? Why are you screaming in the middle of the night, disturbing the whole house?" Ms. Le Twee jumped up and looked around with a dazed look on her face. Where is it? Which is it? My dung." Hai Suong and the workers were all bewildered. "Which my dung? My dung has been transported back to Saigon. Why is she still here? No, is it new here? It's lying on this bed, it's..." She turned to look at Hai Suong with suspicion. "Why did you sleep with me at first, but when I woke up I saw my dung lying right where you were?" Hai Suong heard her say that and panicked. "I'm not a ghost. While she was sleeping, I went out to go to the bathroom, because I was afraid of dirtying her toilet. When I returned, I could hear her scream." Cao Shin, another employee, also spoke up. "While the landlady was screaming in here, someone outside let a large bucket fall under the mimosa tree. That barrel is like. Mrs. Le Twee noticed that and asked, "What box?" Cao Shin pointed out. "Right in front of that door." Hai Suong was the first to run out to see, and from the yard her voice screamed loudly, "Grandma, the coffin, the coffin." Even though Mrs. Le Twee was exhausted, she had to try to drag herself out. Her eyes widened when she saw the blood-red coffin lying coldly in the middle of her yard. Then it was as if an invisible force pushed her steps closer to the coffin. Hai Suong also followed, and while they were still scared and nervous, suddenly the coffin lid seemed to be pushed hard by someone. It bounced off and fell to the ground. "Oh my God!" The loudest scream was from Hai Suong, but the person who fainted was Ms. Le Twee. "The coffin's umpire is my dung." The image of two streams of tears flowing during the shroud. Whatever happened, now it's reappearing before everyone's eyes. Hai Suong was disappointed. "Auntie Hai, please." People did not believe their eyes, but before their eyes, the body lying still in the coffin was the truth, and it seemed to be challenging the hearts of those present that were about to burst. Hai Suong helped the landlady into the house and said, "Cao Shin called Saigon to report this news immediately, lest Mr. Loc worry." Xin immediately called Huang Loc to inform her about the coffin, but from the other end of the line, Loc's voice was shocked. "What are you talking about? My wife's coffin is down here, the funeral is taking place." Cao Shin lost her arms and legs and stood dumbfounded, seeing that Huang Loc was so tired after 2 nights of staying up next to his wife's coffin. Mr. and Mrs. Tan Fat advised him, "I have to sleep to regain my strength, but I can't stand staying up like this all the time." But Loc is still determined. "I can't sleep, Mom and Dad. Every time I close my eyes, I see the image of my wife and children like the day the accident happened, and I'm shocked and scared again." Ms. Tan Fat shook her head. "I know that, but I can't stand it. Or just pray to the ghost of your wife and children, it will help you rest peacefully." Loc looked closely at Iai's eyes, trying to do as his mother-in-law said, but at that moment he suddenly exclaimed, "Look! Wife and children!" He headed towards the door to see the woman who had just entered. Mr. and Mrs. Tanfat also looked and shouted together, "Oh my God, my dung!" At this time, the people who helped take care of the funeral had all gone to bed, so it was just the three of them with a dazed fear. Huang Loc was the most alert person. He asked, "Is it you?" My dung, the woman who had just entered, looked at the three people, looked at Huang Loc quite carefully, then answered, "Hi all. Please allow me to burn incense sticks for the dead." As she spoke, she walked closer to the coffin, and once again Mrs. Tanfat screamed, "My dung! My child!" Mr. Tanfat calmed down, helped his wife take a few steps back, and softly called out, "Are you going to visit your parents at the sacred waterfall?" My dung, the other person glared at the couple and asked in bewilderment, "Who is my dung?" "I'm Ngoc Huang. My family lives nearby. I heard there was a funeral, so I came to offer my condolences." "Why do you call me my dung?" Huang Loc looked at his wife with wide eyes and called out, "My dung, it's me." She glared at Loc again. "What's wrong with this family? Just don't let people burn incense. Why bother this level? I'm Ngoc Huang, I have nothing to do with any my dung." Loc had to shout, "Don't joke around anymore, the whole family is grieving because of you. Why are you?" He was about to reach out and grab his wife's hand when she stepped back very quickly and shouted, "This house is crazy." As she spoke, she ran out, and it took a few seconds for Huang Loc to run after him, shouting loudly, "My dung! I don't." But he could not keep up, because at that time the flow of people and vehicles outside was very large. Meanwhile in the house, before Mr. and Mrs. Tanfat could recover, the others woke up and asked each other in bewilderment, "What's going on?" One person saw the coffin lid open and immediately exclaimed, "Why is the coffin lid like that?" Tu Chuan, who along with the burial team carefully closed the coffin yesterday, spoke up, "Even if you pry the lid of this coffin, you won't be able to open it. Why is it like this?" He stepped forward and exclaimed, "What's wrong with Miss My Dung?" Mr. Tanfat promptly walked forward with his wife. He looked in and was stunned. "It's still here." What surprised Mrs. Tanfat were two tears in the corner of her child's eyes, just like the first time she saw them, and promptly wiped them away. She screamed, "It's still alive, sir!" But when her hand touched her child's body, it was cold. But the two tears flowed like a living person crying. She shouted loudly, "My son!" Her hand touched the tear and she suddenly howled, because it was as red as blood. When Mr. Tanfat saw it, he panicked. "Don't touch it!" But at that time, both of Ms. Tanfat's hands were stained with blood. When she raised them up, Huang Loc walked in from the door with an excited face. "I was about to catch up when my wife and I disappeared into the house in the alley. He suddenly saw the scene before his eyes and stopped. Mr. Tanfat spoke up, "My dung is still here." Loc walked over and saw his wife's body but still didn't believe it. "Impossible." He said that because the person he had just chased was not different from his wife in any way, even the outfit she was wearing was the same outfit that he put on my dung when shrouding the body. "Impossible." He looked at his mother-in-law's bloody hands with surprise. "What's wrong, Mom?" Mr. Tanfat pointed to his daughter's eyes. Tears flowed from his eyes and she touched it, and it happened like that. Tu Chuan said, "The body has been shrouded, and now the grandparents and Mr. Hai have to burn incense to perform the ceremony again, which is considered a second burial. Second aunt must be upset about something, that's why." Mr. Tanfat agreed. Then please help me. But Huang Loc stopped him. I can't believe that my wife's body is that of the woman just now. It's impossible for someone to be so strangely similar to someone. Tu Chuan still recommends. I'll figure out something later, but for now, let's close the Mandarin's cloak, instead. This is not convenient. Auntie Hai has now returned to the underworld, she cannot. Suddenly, Ms. Tan Fat shouted. Now I realize that there is no way the dead can come back to life like just now, while my child is still lying in this coffin. That's right, he must have had a heart again that I didn't know about for a long time. You, tell me, is that child your own child? Mr. Tan Fat was bewildered. Which stepchild? That girl just came in and asked to burn incense, who else? Only with his bloodline can there be a child who looks exactly like my dung. Even about Loc, I was wrong, bad talk. If I have a child, I will never lose it. Loc is still like a sleepy person. Unbelievable. Same as 2 drops of water, same. Mrs. Tan Fat forgot that her hands were covered in blood. She grabbed her husband's shoulder and got angry. Now when the house is on fire, rats appear. For so long I was blind, so I trusted you, but... She cried loudly before the bewilderment of all the servants in the house. Especially Tu Chuan, he is impatiently trying to close the lid of his mandarin's robe, but what can he do with that? He reminded Huang Loc. Hey, look. Loc turned back to him and said. Just leave it to me. But as soon as Loc's sentence ended, the coffin lid suddenly slammed shut. Tu Chuan was bewildered. What's so strange? Huang Loc stepped forward and tried to pull it out, but the lid of the coffin seemed to have been firmly nailed, unable to move. Mr. Tan Fat took the opportunity to say loudly. You did such nonsense that it shocked your son's soul. Huang Loc also said. Mom and Dad, let's put that aside, now we have to focus on taking care of my dung. Even though he said he was focused, Loc didn't know what he was worried about. Until Tu Chuan reminded, because Mr. and Mrs. Tan Fat also invited monks to chant according to Buddhist rituals. Later, a few monks will come chanting sutras. Among these monks, there is monk Tian Tan who is well versed in evil spirits. Maybe I should ask him to take a look. Loc nodded. Indeed. Just then, 3 monks entered. Thanks to that, the argument between the old couple temporarily calmed down. But she still turned to the monk with the Dharma named Tian Tan and suggested. Please look at it for me, my daughter. Before she could finish speaking, monk Tian Tan spoke up and pointed at the coffin. As soon as this person's soul exits, it immediately re-enters, otherwise. He turned back to look at Huang Loc. Is there any hatred like that between your wife and someone else? Loc was surprised. Who do you hate, teacher? Have. If you die and still show up before the 49 days have passed, that's a problem. Don't you see there are tears in the corners of the eyes in that photo? Only then did Loc and everyone else look up at the portrait standing in front of the coffin. They clearly saw 2 streams of tears flowing out like people were still alive. Miss Tan Fat exclaimed. It's also on its body. The monk slowly said. This phenomenon is a positive thing, because there is an injustice that has not been resolved. It must be resolved before burial, otherwise. He turned to Loc and said softly. Your wife died not from a car accident, but before the car fell off the cliff. Mr. Tan Fat and his wife were frightened. Is that a problem? Huang Loc was still in shock when the monk quickly continued. This may not have anything to do with you, but her death is somewhat mysterious. I will chant prayers for her soul to pass away, then the homeowner will plan something later. He began the prayer. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Tan Fat pulled LOC out to ask. What does the teacher mean? LOC honestly recounted. When we got close to Bao LOC Pass, my dung complained of a headache. I applied some oil and dung said she felt better. She just seemed unwell, nothing out of the ordinary. After that, Dung leaned her head on the chair and fell asleep. I left her alone to sleep. While my car was running, I suddenly heard an unusual noise under the car. I wanted to stop and look, but because I was going uphill, I had to wait until the slope was over before pulling over. However, when Huang Loc mentioned that, he was so excited that he had to pause for a moment before continuing. As I said, suddenly the car shook violently, then I could no longer control the car, and Miss Tan Fat exclaimed. That's right, my dung fainted before the car accident. Was she poisoned? Huang Loc panicked. Who poisoned it? My wife and children were still conscious half a minute ago. She didn't show any signs of being poisoned, right? Mr. Tan Fat said. Then we have to leave Dung's body behind, waiting for an autopsy, no be buried. Huang Loc also agreed. Probably have to do that. But she objected. My child died so tragically and now his body is being torn apart and dissected, you know how sorry he is. She burst into tears. From inside the house, Monk Tian Tan stepped out and said in a gentle voice. There's no need to do that. This is a spiritual matter, let the deceased decide. Miss Tan Fat suddenly asked. What does that mean? Teacher, wait until I finish reciting this prayer, then the family can bury me. Let her soul decide the rest. Just do that and everything will become clear. He went back into the house and said again. People in the underworld behave more clearly than in the earthly world. He continued to knock on the drum to pray while Mrs. Tan Fat stood still and asked her husband from time to time. Should we listen to the teacher? Loc chimed in. I think just do it like that. Now maybe I'll let someone re-examine our accident car. They were able to extract it and bring it to the garage recently. Mr. Tan Fat was also upset. The teacher said that my Dung's child died before the car fell into the hole, so why bother looking at the car? Loc is still determined. According to me, yes. I'm wondering about a few things. He stood next to his wife's coffin, silently praying for something for a long time. By noon that day, the chanting session ended. Before leaving, Monk Tian Tan called Loc aside and said, you will have many difficulties finding out the problems surrounding your wife's death. It is better for you to take her body and bury it on your own land rather than bury it in a cemetery. Loc hesitated. This is something my parents do not agree with. They want to be buried in a cemetery to make it easier to visit, or could you please help me? Master Tian Tan nodded. Okay, let me talk. Thanks to his persuasion, Mr. Tan Fat and his wife finally agreed. But she still has conditions. You must ensure that if you marry another wife in the future, there will be no obstacles to visiting this family. Otherwise, Mom will have the grave moved to another place immediately. Huang Loc said firmly. I promise my parents that I will only get married once in my life. My home will forever be my Dung's home. I swear to her spirit. According to Master Tian Tan's advice, my Dung's burial was carried out that evening. He emphasized. Rooster time is suitable for this burial. Loc's small villa has a yard planted with many flowers in the back. He buried his wife right in the middle of colorful flower beds. Min couldn't sit still when for 2 consecutive days his house phone kept ringing and then shutting off as soon as someone picked up the receiver. He was so upset that he personally picked up the phone 3 times and cursed at it with the harshest words. And this morning too. Just as he finished changing and was about to leave, the bell rang. As soon as he picked up the phone, he cursed. "You impolite, you." Before he finished speaking, a clear female voice spoke on the other end of the line. "Why are you so aggressive, thug boss?" Since then, no one has dared to speak so arrogantly to him, so Min immediately said harshly. "Who is that set? Do you want to kill me like killing people at Boloc Pass?" Min's heart skipped a beat. His voice was no longer natural. Who said that? Why do I need to know who it is when you haven't answered me yet? Are you planning to kill me like you killed Huang Loc and his wife?" Min immediately put down the receiver, his face turned pale. The phone rang again. Not daring to pick up the phone rang for nearly a minute. Finally, he quickly pressed the button to end the call and breathed a sigh of relief. But strangely enough, the voice on the phone still rang out. "You know you're scared, Mr. Min. I thought that a person who dared to do terrible things like you was not afraid of anyone, even a ghost taking revenge." Min's body felt cold and trembling, something that had never happened in his entire life as a gangster. Even if he wanted to control it, he couldn't. The strange coldness came from his gut, so the more he tried to control it, the more he trembled and his teeth almost touched each other. "So, are you willing to talk to me now, Mr. Min?" Min was like a chicken caught in the rain, his voice trembling as he asked. "Who are you, ghosts? Have you ever heard of ghosts, miss?" "I didn't do anything." The voice on the phone started to get colder. "Don't do anything, just kill people and throw their bodies into the abyss, right?" He was truly devastated. "I beg you, oh look, the thug boss, killing people like crazy, but now he's so cowardly. So when you personally released the brakes on Huang Loc's car and lost the brakes when going downhill, were you afraid?" He only repeated it a few times but couldn't say anything else. The voice on the phone still rings. "Then who swapped Loc's wind head bottle, so that when his wife inhaled it, she went into a coma?" What is the main purpose of that crime? Is it because the pharmacy pays high wages or some other reason? Say it yourself, Mr. Min. Don't let me go." Min was trembling as he tried to crawl to the door. When he was able to stand up, he ran like crazy to his parked car. When the car reached the street, he breathed a sigh of relief. At least he got rid of that deadly voice. He had a business appointment with some customers at a location in the city center and he should have gone there immediately when he revved the engine, but for some reason his car's direction was toward the suburbs. Nearly half an hour later, Min turned the car into a majestic house deep in a garden filled with the smell of ornamental flowers. Welcoming him was a woman in a wheelchair. She rolled her wheelchair out to the steps when she saw Min's car enter. Min got out of the car and cuddled with that person by holding her in his arms. Brought into the living room, speaking affectionately. "As I said, Li is not allowed to roll her bike out there. What if she falls down the steps?" the person named Li cooed. "Well, I have help, so don't worry. You are not always here to help. But I still have a lot of things bothering me. Although Li is old, she is a beautiful woman, as attractive as a young girl. It is said that disabled women always have a hidden charm and appeal that is difficult for any able-bodied woman to have. Therefore, Min, a notorious gangster, has countless girls under his command. The youngest, young and beautiful, is infatuated with her, while she still has a husband and children, and Min is living with 2 other young wives. Li's voice is like honey. "Why are you so tight and haggard when you're tied up by those 2 shackles? Honey, where are the pillars if there are pillars? How can we hold this Min guy?" Their romantic conversation was interrupted by the phone ringing. Having been tormented by the phone ringing for 2 days, as soon as I heard the bell ringing, Min immediately said, "Do not listen." Li frowned. "Why don't you listen? I'm waiting for Lan Huang's phone call from France." But Min didn't feel comfortable expressing his thoughts, so he didn't stop him anymore and let Li pick up the phone. I don't know what she heard someone say on the phone, but she looked at Min and turned around and asked, "Who knew you were here?" Min panicked. "Say you just went out." But the voice on the phone sounded exactly like when Min was at his house. "What's wrong, Mr. Min? Do you think you can escape by running away here? And if he escapes, will his beloved daughter and Mrs. Li here in France escape?" Not only did Min's face turn pale with this statement, but Li was also shaken. She asked in a trembling voice, "Who are you to know our daughter?" The other person's voice burst into laughter as sharp as a knife, and after the laughter came a series of terrifying roars. As soon as he heard his daughter's name, he became extremely worried, while at the same time, he killed other people's daughters without hesitation. Ms. Li could no longer keep calm, and drove the wheelchair quickly, approached the phone and picked up the receiver, her voice trembling. What did you say about my daughter?" He doesn't do anything, he just goes to school. So what about other people's daughters? They only know how to live happily and get married. Yes. Just be happy. Why did your husband kill her? You said. Who did he kill? If you want to know who to kill, ask the man next to you. At this point, Min no longer kept the secret. He said what even his beloved lover intended to hide. "Just because I don't want my daughter to be abandoned by Ms. Le Tui. For a long time, he wanted Huang Loc to be his son-in-law. I also want that, because between me and Ms. Le Tui, we promised to be married to each other." Ms. Li rolled her eyes. "So Le Tui's daughter-in-law died because of you?" Min remained silent, only the voice on the phone rang out. Not only did he kill that innocent daughter-in-law, but he also intended to kill Huang Loc. Not believing it was true, Ms. Li looked at Min with wide eyes, making him confused and trembling. I didn't mean to kill Loc. That day, I had someone break the door latch on the driver's side, intending that as soon as the car was about to plunge into the abyss, by natural reaction, Huang Loc would throw the car door open to escape and only fall on the edge of the cliff. Doubtful. But in the end, Huang Loc did not die. "Oh my God, Mr. Min!" Ms. Li screamed and fell forward, her whole body shaking. Perhaps her heart attack was breaking out. Min panicked. Li, what's wrong with you?" The voice rang out again. "You have committed another crime." After that sentence, the voice fell silent. Only Min's sobs were heard. "Honey, I just want to regain my daughter's love. Only 1 more month until he returns home. He needs a husband like Ms. Le Thui's son. Only then will this house and our other assets not be confiscated by the bank to pay him back. For the real estate company that Huang Loc is currently the director of, I just want to keep you and your mother happy." The more he said, the more violently Ms. Li's body convulsed. When she suddenly remembered, Min picked her up and ran into a private room to save her. But it seems it's too late. Mrs. Le Tui woke up very early and told Hai Suong, "I have guests today, so you guys are going to the market to make food for them." Hai Suong asked again, "How many guests, ma'am?" "About 4 or 5 people." "Yes, are you a man or a woman? Are you just dining or are you drinking?" Ms. Le Tui said. "The guests are all men." "You buy me half a dog." Hai Suong was shocked. "Mrs. What did you say to buy dog meat? You call a car to go down to Tray Mat?" They sell pre-cooked dog meat there, buy it to take home and just make one grilled dish for me. Hai Suong's face turned green. I don't know how to eat dog meat. I'm not used to the smell anymore. If you don't get used to it, you'll get used to it. Bring it back here and I'll show you how to do it. Faced with the strange attitude of the landlady, Hai Suong felt a bit strange. Why did she come back from abroad and tell her to cook dog meat for guests? Are you surprised that I told you to make dog meat unexpectedly? She understood my feelings, so Hai Suong was a bit confused. Yes. I'm just worried that the dog meat dish is a bit strange. I've never heard of anyone serving it to guests. Mrs. Le Tui suddenly burst out laughing. People don't treat you, but you treat them well. Besides, these people have to treat them with dog meat to make them like it. Hai Suong knew the owner's personality. The more she talked, the more she expressed her concerns, so she still had questions when she took my motorbike, but still went to buy it. When driving to Tre Mat, a suburb of Dalat City, Hai Suong was even more confused, because looking around she couldn't see anywhere selling dog meat. Hai Suong didn't dare ask, because who in her life would buy dog meat? Still confused, someone suddenly asked from the street. Are you looking to buy dog meat? Hai Suong was startled. Yes, yes. But how do you know? The middle-aged man smiled and said. I knew right away when I saw you bewildered like that. But just for fun, someone has already told you, you can just take the meat and bring it home without having to pay. Hai Suong was even more surprised. Did my mistress tell me? The man shook his head. You don't need to know. Please bring it back, he said as he gave Suong a plastic bag and instructed. Bring it home, open it, and just follow the instructions on the paper and you will have delicious food right away. Hai Suong carried the basket with shaking hands. Until now, have you ever known what dog meat is like? Just imagining a whole newly slaughtered dog in the basket makes Suong want to vomit. She braced herself to take it and pedaled her way back home. As soon as I arrived at the gate, I saw a few strangers standing in the yard. Ms. Le Tui looked out and urged. Hurry and bring it in, what are you waiting for? Then she turned to a young guest and said. If you already have this guy, then you give him that shit to do. Having finished speaking, she turned to the old man standing facing inwards and said. I like eating this dish right at the yard more than you do. The man turned around and it turned out he was Ba Min. Hearing the question, he reluctantly replied. Yes. Fine. We eat and talk at the same time. It's best that you don't let it. For the people working out here, don't worry, it will be just us. Now, please sit around this stone table, while someone brings a package of meat here. We put it on the table and then move the stove to the back. Ba Min's Jr. placed the basket on the table. As soon as he opened it, Mrs. Le Tui stopped him. No, this honor should be left to Mr. Ba. Ba Min smiled very awkwardly. Anyone can do it, it doesn't matter. He said that but still reached out to untie the basket's rope. The package was quite large and tied at 2 kilograms, so it took him nearly half a minute to unwrap the outer layer. As soon as he saw what was inside, Ba Min screamed. Oh my God! In front of him and everyone was a human skull, not a dog's. And it's not an ordinary skull, because even though it's lying apart from the body, the head's eyes are still blinking like a living person. His subordinates were standing outside so they quickly ran away, while Ba Min was frozen in place. However, I could only run a few steps and then, for some reason, I stopped dead in my tracks as if my feet were rooted to the ground. Ms. Le Tui suddenly burst out laughing. Do murderers also know how to fear corpses? Hearing her strange voice, Ba Min looked stunned and stammered and asked. Ms. Tui, is that you Ms. Le Twee still had a strange laugh. If not, then who first? Look at that skull and see who it is. Ba Min looked down again, and this time he screamed even more horrifyingly than before. Li Li. It was clear that Ms. Li Li's head was looking at him with tears streaming down both corners of her eyes. Ba Min grabbed and hugged the skull in his arms. Just then a strange howl rang out from that skull, and Ba Min jumped back, letting the skull roll to the ground. His juniors clearly saw all the developments. They were all tongue-tied, wanting to scream but unable to open their mouths. Until Mrs. Le Twee suddenly stood up, walked towards them and asked, "Who damaged Huang Loc's car brakes?" As she asked, she pointed straight at a name called Hung Sui. "Is it you?" This guy just opened his mouth to deny it when he suddenly screamed in pain. Looking back, saw his mouth full of blood, part of his tongue had fallen to the ground. The remaining guys were frightened but had to stand still as if they were trapped by heaven. Until Ms. Le Twee asked again, "Who put the anesthetic in the glass of water for Huang Loc's wife to drink?" Pop. Chat. As soon as she finished asking, she raised her hand and slapped her junior named Nam Jie on both cheeks. "It's you, no one else is here." Another tongue fell out at the same time as that guy's pitiful cry. It's Dad's turn. Right now he was terrified, trembling, and wanted to run away, but that was when his name was called. They are just lackeys, they will do whatever their master tells them to do. And you, who told you your explanation is because you're afraid your daughter won't marry a rich husband, right? So he had to eliminate his opponent at all costs. That action of his caused the woman who loved him to sacrifice her whole life, suffer disability because he gave her the wrong abortion pill, and because of him, she had to suffer separation from her husband, because of that other man. I can't stand the sight of my wife falling in love with a gangster like him. Now she is dead, because she knew he committed a heinous crime. What else do you want? And your daughter is about to return home, right? Ba Min screamed and pleaded. "No, please don't harm my child. All the sins are my fault, my daughter doesn't know anything, she also doesn't want to follow my crimes." As soon as he moved his arms and legs, Ms. Li Li's skull naturally rolled under his feet. Handily, he bent down to hug her and sobbed. But strangely enough, he suddenly let out a long, terrible howl, then threw himself to the ground. At that time, Hai Suong and a few other people in the house heard the screams outside and ran out to look, and were shocked to see Ba Min jumping to the ground and turning into a huge black dog. Hai Suong was the one who carried the dog meat basket, so she was even more frightened when she saw that. She was tongue-tied. He. Then Mrs. Le Twee turned around and said loudly for her family to hear. "This evil person has already paid for his crime, so your mistress is also forgiven from now on. And tell her not to treat her daughter-in-law like that again." As she finished speaking, like a shadow, her figure turned into smoke and disappeared. Cao Shin stood next to Suong and said, "Come and see, why has my mistress disappeared?" Hai Suong was disappointed. So strange. Suddenly she remembered and said, "Did you hear what she said just now? Why did she say she had forgiven her mistress? So who is she without an appointment?" They ran into the house together and knocked on Ms. Le Thui's door. "Madam." They called until their throats were hoarse, but there was still no answer, but inside at that moment there seemed to be a muffled sound. Hai Suong says, "Let's just open the door and go in. Maybe the owner has an accident or something." They opened the door just in time to see Ms. Le Twee fall to the floor. "Madam." They woke her up, and just as Ms. Le Twee woke up, she asked in fear. "Where is it?" Hai Shin asked. "Who did the owner?" asked she. "Loc's wife." After recovering, she said. I was sleeping in here and suddenly I felt someone pressing on my body, then my neck felt like it was blocked, I couldn't speak or scream. I can't even sit up. Hai Suong was bewildered. So who is the person in the yard receiving guests then this morning? Did you send me to buy dog meat? Ms. Le Tui widened her eyes in surprise. Why do I say buy dog meat, but I haven't left my room since morning. I'm pinned down on this bed by someone, as you can see. Everyone seemed to fall from the sky, especially Hai Suong. She was stunned for a moment and then asked herself. Is it? Aunt Hai Sao-shin heard that and immediately asked. Is it wrong for Ms. My Dung's soul? Hai Suong is like a lost soul. Wrong soul? What an unjust soul. Lan Huang had just stepped out of the airport and entered the waiting room to pick up her luggage when she saw a young man waving his hand at the door waiting. At first, thinking he was waving to someone, Huang did not respond, but then looking closely, she saw that in his hand he was holding a piece of cardboard with the name Lan Huang on it. She was startled and asked herself. Could it be this guy? She took a small piece of paper from her coat pocket and read it again. Huang Loc will be waiting. Airport. I only know that before Huang Loc went to study abroad, it was more than 10 years ago, so Lan Huang, standing in front of him now, surely did not remember. However, when she looked again at the guy holding the card with the word Lan Huang written on it, she thought to herself, it exceeded my expectations. Huang still remembers that more than a month ago, she received a letter from her father, in which he wrote, Dad has found the son you've been waiting for, Huang Loc, whom you praised before going to study abroad as handsome, smart, and gentle. Even though Loc was only 12 years old at the time, he is now nearly 30, a handsome, talented, and wealthy man. If my parents had him as their son-in-law, what happiness would be better? A few days before Huang returned home, she received a telegram from her hometown, saying that when she returned home, she would receive a lot of news that was both bad and good at the same time, but that unexpected happiness would help her overcome the difficulties. The news is called bad. At that time, Lan Huang could not imagine what was going on. Until today, for more than 10 hours on the plane, she thought and thought but still couldn't figure out what was waiting for her at home. After getting her luggage, Lan Huang had just pushed the car to the door of her relatives to pick her up when Huang Loc approached and immediately spoke. I'm Huang Loc, I came to pick up Lan Huang with your permission. Lan Huang was polite and soft-spoken. I've been told a lot about you by my parents, but I didn't expect. Loc immediately said. Didn't expect to be disappointed, right? The two laughed happily and from that moment, they became close. Both of them don't understand why. When Loc drove Huang straight to her house, instead of being surprised, she very naturally followed Loc into the house and asked. Does the house have enough room for you to sleep over? Huang Loc had prepared in advance. He pointed to the most spacious room in the house and replied. Not only does it have a room, but it's also the most beautiful room. Lan Huang did not ask anything about her parents' absence, until Loc proactively said. If Huang heard sad news now, what would you do? She suddenly asked. You want to talk about my parents, right? Loc nodded. That's right. Are you very sad? She was in tears, but still conscious. While sitting in your car, I didn't understand why I heard this sad news ringing in my ears. At that time, I was shocked and wanted to cry when suddenly your car turned into the house. When I stopped, I was like another person. Now I'm just sad for a while. Huang Loc held her hand and said very softly. From now on I am no longer Lan Huang. Rather, I'm Lan Huang, but actually I'm your real wife. Loc said these words while looking at Huang. She had no reaction, other than looking at him passionately. Then, the two of them stood in front of my Dung's altar. Huang Loc spoke. "You did exactly what I wanted. Now that Lan Huang is here, she clearly doesn't know what her parents do at all. She..." Before Loc finished speaking, he heard Lan Huang say, "I know, why don't you turn around and look at me?" Huang Loc turned to look and he exclaimed with excitement, "It's me, my Dung." Her giggle just happened to be when the large door that Loc had just opened suddenly slammed shut, and the light that was on also went out. Show me the joyful cries of two people in the darkness. Makes people crazy. Thank you for paying me. Remember, this is a reward for an honest person who wholeheartedly loves his wife. If you get lost, not only will you lose me, but Lan Huang's body will also belong to someone else. Who would be foolish enough to lose both?" A painful pinch, but the one who received it was Huang Loc. The guy tried to endure the pain, but when he could no longer bear it, he cried out, "It hurts, don't pinch that area." In the darkness, two people are intertwined and perhaps happiness will stay with them for a long time. Although the story of Lan Huang and Huang Loc getting married happened quietly, some people still knew. They discussed among themselves. "Loc is so bad, his wife died less than 6 months ago and already married another wife." Another said, "But it's also strange, I heard that Miss Mai Dung's spirit is very spirited, so why did he accept Loc's new wife to live in the house that still has her altar in it?" No matter what anyone says, Loc and Lan Huang are still happy together. Ms. Le Tui still lives in Dalat, but occasionally returns to Saigon. Every time she returned, she got along very well with Lan Huang, a far cry from her indifferent and jealous attitude towards Mai Dung in the past. And if anyone saw it, they would be more surprised, because she always stood in front of Mai Dung's altar and prayed very sincerely. One time, she even called Lan Huang closer, stood in front of the altar and said, "Mom knew her mistake, knew your altruistic heart when she accepted Lan Huang to bring her body back to join your soul to become Loc's wife. Mom, thank you." Only Mrs. Le Tui knows the secret of Loc and Lan Huang, and she has sworn to keep it forever. Therefore, many people are surprised why Lan Huang has not once returned home to visit her mother's house. That massive villa was abandoned. However, upon investigation, people discovered that the house was not completely deserted, but actually had a very large black dog residing. That dog is the embodiment of Ba Min. Although there are no people in the villa, only that dog keeps the house as cozy as if someone lived there. No thief dared to sneak in because several times, a greedy person entered the house and was immediately bitten by the dog's neck and torn to pieces. Only Lan Huang and her husband knew about it. They often confide in Ms. Le Tui. That black dog is the soul of Ba Min. Ba Min is a great evil person, so he dies not as a ghost but as a devil. However, it was restrained by Mai Dung, locking it forever in that house. Inside the house, it's just a cunning dog, but normally it's not dangerous. Unless someone finds a way to get it out, then it will become extremely dangerous. The person possessed by it will be a ghost, extremely dangerous. Ms. Le Tui asked fearfully, "Why don't you destroy it completely, let it be like that one day?" But Mai Dung's ghost asserted, "Only when Mr. Loc abandons Lan Huang, that is, abandons me, will I let the black dog escape. And then the first victim will be Huang Loc." Huang Loc buried his face in his wife's hair and lovingly said, "Even if the sky falls, I won't dare leave you again." The end.
Thank you for taking the time to watch Ghost Stories video. Hopefully the content has brought you interesting and meaningful moments. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Ghost Stories YouTube channel to follow the channel's next videos. See you in the next video. Have a good day.